Thank you.
I'm gonna leave this with you. Thank you.
Wait until he sits down. Thank you. All right, let's get this meeting started here. This is a hybrid meeting. The city council members of the public can view this meeting live on Channel 8, the city's website, and YouTube. Live Spanish translation services are being provided for tonight's council meeting by telephone. Please dial 720-386-9023 and use code 104091*. The city clerk is the host of the Zoom meeting. Speakers will be able to unmute themselves when recognized. I call the study session to order. First presentation is the highway median design option, and Anahan will lead it off for Director of Public Works.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Nice to see you all this evening. So we're here tonight to talk about our Highway 2 median improvement project that we're handling through our capital investment program. So tonight we'll provide council with an overview of where we're currently at with that particular project, and at the end of the presentation, we will be seeking some direction from you all on how you would like us to proceed with the project based on the budget that we have available to us. So in this discussion, we're going to look at the project. We're also going to discuss what some typical roadway cross sections look like. We'll do that with some diagrams so it's easy to follow along. And then we'll also be exploring alternatives 1 and alternatives 2, and that's in reference to the primary project. So we'll have 3 options to go through all together. We'll compare costs of all of those options, and then we'll talk about council's desire on how to move forward. So our project location here that we're looking at is this area in the blue cloud on the map. Essentially, it's the Highway 2 corridor from East 72nd Avenue all the way to East 112th Avenue. Project goals. The primary purpose of this particular CIP project is to replace the current painted median that we have along Highway 2 in particular segments. And the goal would then be to improve safety by replacing that painted median with alternative options, which would reduce the number of accidents and lessen the severity of any accidents that do still occur after improvements have taken place. So again, we have 3 improvement options. So option number 1 is to build medians along that entire corridor we just looked at. And for this project, the city does have $3.2 million already allocated and available to spend for the project. We're also working on an IGA with CDOT that would hopefully provide an additional $1.9 million for this project. That would be a huge win for us to get that additional funding, but essentially we're looking at 3.2 right now with certainty. So option 1, constructing traditional raised medians along the entire corridor that we looked at on the prior slide, is going to cost us $24.3 million. So of course, we have a bit of a shortfall. We can't complete that project within our current budget. But thankfully, we do have some alternative options. So alternative 1 would be to build the proposed raised medians in prioritized segments of Highway 2, and we'll go through what those segments look like. And we would have to look at the different costs associated with that, because the cost for installation does vary based on where on Highway 2 we install them. We'd have to talk about how to prioritize installation, right? Which segment of Highway 2 gets a raised median at this time, which one do we budget for potentially later down the road? We do, with our $3.2 million, we have enough funds to complete any one segment that we'll talk about coming up. And then alternative 2 would essentially be looking at alternative treatments that we can install in lieu of the painted median and in lieu of doing raised medians across the entire corridor. So we do have enough funding to complete rumble strips and delineators across all of that Highway 2 section we just looked at. So let's move on to some typical sections. So this slide here is representative of a standard raised median. So when we're talking about raised medians, what we initially thought of when we were putting this project together, this just shows you what that would look like, traditional median, high curbs, colored stamped concrete, etc. So typical section here is representative of a two-way left turn lane, and this is a condition that already exists on the south end of Highway 2, and it essentially just allows vehicles to turn left from both directions on a road. Typical section 3 is representative of a single or double barrier option. And so type 9 barrier is language we'll see here later in the presentation, and that is just talking about a concrete barrier, either a single concrete barrier or a double concrete barrier. And then finally here, this typical section represents what rumble strips and delineators would look like, and those would essentially just alert drivers that they're starting to cross over the painted median. So we're going to dive into looking at the 7 different segments of Highway 2. These segments are purely based on major intersection to major intersection. They're not in any sort of prioritization order. So segment 1 here would be East 72nd to Quebec Parkway, and the color coding here shows you where it would be appropriate to install rumble strips and where it would be appropriate where traffic would allow to install a raised median. And then you see the cost associated at the bottom here with doing a raised median for this section. And it's important to point out that the reason we can't do raised medians everywhere is traffic does sometimes need to get from one side of the street to the other, which is where the rumble strips would come into handy. So segment 2 here, we have Quebec Parkway to East 88th Avenue, and this is where the design team had to start to get a little more creative with what makes sense for traffic and what would still be safe. So again, we show where raised medians would go, but then we're also showing where it would be appropriate to have a single type 9 barrier and then a double type 9 barrier. Same scenario as we move on to segment 3, which is East 88th to East 96th. And again, the cost of the raised median at the bottom of the slide. Segment 4, same exact scenario as the other couple segments. This is just Quebec Parkway to, East 96 to 104th. Our 5th segment here is East 104th to Turnberry Parkway. And once again, we're looking at the raised median or single type 9 option and the costs associated. Segment 6, Turnberry Parkway to Potomac, where it would only be appropriate to have a single type 9 barrier or raised median option. And our last segment here is Potomac Street to the end of the roadway. And here it would only be appropriate to do a raised median. So let's look at what the costs look like for all 7 segments for a raised median. Numbers match with the segments we just looked at on the slide. So segment 1 through 7, and your total there of $24.3 million, keeping in mind our earlier budget that we discussed. Now, the alternative that I alluded to earlier would be installing these rumble strips and delineators, which we could do across all 7 segments. We would not have to pick or prioritize segments. We have it within our budget to take care of this right now. So really the discussion that we have to have is, does council want to continue down the initial path of installing raised medians? If so, how do we prioritize which segment we do that within our current budget for? And alternative 2 would be to install those simplified treatments that we looked at on the 7 different segments that we can install on all 7 different segments within the current budget. So that's the open conversation I'm hoping to have this evening. What's council's desire? How do we prioritize installing along Highway 2? Our team has done a lot of great design work to get us to this point, but we just simply cannot move forward without council's direction and understanding how you would like us to handle the safety on Highway 2. So I'll leave this up because I know there are a lot of options here.
All right, Councilmember Dukes.
Thank you. I just have a question. I have 2 questions. One, does staff have a preferred recommendation that you can share based on your expertise? And then the other question I have, I think about the delineators and rumble strips. Is there a lifeline on those? How long do you have to replace those?
So I know I personally wouldn't have an opinion to express other than just asking City Manager Rogers if he has one, reminding us that we are pretty constrained within our budget, so.
So the cost-effective option is the rumble strips with the delineators. Delineators are very difficult to deal with on many levels. Sean, you probably know, you worked in Public Works. They're difficult to maintain. They're difficult to work around with snowplow operations. They cause a lot of concerns for staff. I'm not saying we can't do it and manage it, but it is arduous for staff to manage those. If you're asking me a preferred option, I would love to focus our improvement efforts where we can and look for grant opportunities and look for future opportunities to expand on it rather than kind of a piecemeal rumble strip delineators across the entire corridor. I understand that would address everybody along the corridor, but it has some downfalls to it.
And just to put that with a little bit of a finer edge to what Jeff's saying, obviously I agree with that position of, take a section and get a win. I would look at where did we just most recently implement high hazard zones along Highway 2 and effectively using this as another tool in being able to mitigate some of those traffic concerns and issues in those areas. Because obviously with high speed and when you think about that, right, you can easily cross those lines with what we found. Now, obviously we've been better with the enforcement and there's an awareness. But when you also have that separation, you have that both physical and visual awareness that will also help people to impede their speed because of the concerns that may come around hitting your car into a raised median or a Jersey wall. So I would say look at where we've already taken some initial steps with the high hazard zones and using not that as an enforcement tool, but using this as an additional measure on top of that.
Thank you. And time frame for either option. Obviously, building a meeting probably take a long. What's the time frame for that versus the years?
Mike, do you have a time estimate? Our CIP manager.
I would say we probably about 6 more months of design for doing that, and then construction, between bidding, and everything. I would say I want to get in a year. So we can talk about a year and a half for both options, design and development and construction for both options. But we'd have to choose one of the options. I don't know how long we need the options. Oh, I think that's already here. Okay, how long does it? I could probably be done in less than a year. The other one would be 6 months for design. 6 months for construction. I would think it'd be more like a year of construction, so like a year and a half. Thank you. Sure. And then, do you have all the high hazards are online, right? Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All the high hazard zones are online, or do we have another image that show where the high hazards are right now, the efforts?
I don't have one in this slideshow.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have it. And I think where, as I was speaking on spur of the moment based off of what I know actions that we've taken beforehand, if we're looking at, like I said, trying to couple and to create greater efficiencies with regards to enforcement on potential traffic conflicts and speed, I would tailor it to that. But
And that's what I'm hearing. Like it makes sense to build on what you're currently working on, so supplement and not supplant it, so it doesn't seem like it's all spread out, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
yes, sir.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Chacon? Okay. Councilmember Teeter?
I just have a question on how can we, or have any studies been done on these medians I'm worried about cars launching themselves over to the other lane and then hitting another car while they're airborne. And have we done any studies on the possibility of that happening?
Have we? We have not.
Okay. In other words, and I would have to see some type of study from somewhere to, if that can actually happen, a median is going to be worthless.
So they would only be designed to current standards. So, and the current standards takes into account the clear zone that's required for a curb and gutter, and for that particular speed. So we would design it to those standards, and that would take it into account. We don't have a study that specifically addresses that because it's built into the design standards, but I could certainly elaborate on that and send that to all the council members.
Yeah, so those typical sections we were looking at earlier, those aren't something we've created. That's industry standard, and we'd be following one of those typical sections for whichever installation plan we moved forward with.
Okay, and I mean, it just, they have pickups out there today that'll crawl up over anything, it seems like, and it just, that's something we need to take into account. Because it, instead of just having somebody cross over the other lane on level ground, now you're looking at somebody launching to the other side, and it's, that could be pretty scary.
So I think to Jeff's point, we've got at least another 6 months for design work, and obviously that's a conversation at the operational level that we can have with the design team to take into account, so that when we go out for bid, right, that's a part of that's already inherently a part of the construction practice. Just so that you all have where our high hazard zones are on Highway 2, it's the 7200 block to the 7900 block. So that's 72nd really up to 88th Avenue. I think what we have here in this exhibit is from Quebec Parkway up to 88th. And then from 8800 block to the 9500 block is our high hazard zone. Our second one on Highway 2, which is really 88th to 96. So I would say, based on the presentation that you heard today, if the recommendation was to go forward, I would say, segment 2 or segment 3 is where you're going to get the greatest bang for your buck, and also having to help mitigate some of those traffic concerns and impacts. And if you think about it, if anybody's driven south in the morning on Highway 2 at rush hour, you know that people are already driving over those double lines, forming that turn lane, which can also create a hazard and a conflict. And we just most recently had a huge traffic accident last week that, botched up traffic for about a 2-hour period because of some of those practices. So I would say, taking that all into account, 2 or 3 would be a recommendation.
Okay, Councilmember Douglas. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Ford.
So I would prefer the raised medians just because of a maintenance standpoint. However, the areas that I see that are probably the most dangerous, the area around 88th Avenue to the north where people are, because that turn lane loads up, people are going the wrong way down Highway 2 to get around behind the turn lane to get back on the right side of the road. That's, I think, an area where we need something to deter them from utilizing that movement. The other one is where the businesses are between 96th Avenue and 104th. On the northbound lanes, the businesses will literally go the wrong way down Highway 2 to try to avoid the median that is already placed in front of those businesses. Matter of fact, they'll even drive on the jogging path that's alongside Highway 2 to get down and then cut across. So to try to eliminate some of the dangerous movements from those businesses and from the people trying to get around the 88th Avenue lane, that the turn lane loading. The only question I have is on these permanent medians, rather than going with the maintenance unfriendly delineators and rumble strips. I noticed that on Tower Road and on Quebec, a lot of our raised medians, the plows have taken chunks out of the front corners of them. And if we're going to go with raised medians, I think we also need a maintenance program to repair, in the springtime after plows have hit and taken chunks of concrete out, because I know some of that concrete that's busted gets will get out into a lane, creates traffic problems throughout the year. So I'd like to make sure that we have a plan to address the damage caused by the plows throughout the winter, that at least in the springtime, someone goes out and checks them, removes any debris, and tries to put something together to have them repaired before the next snow season, is all I'm asking.
Yeah, that's great insight. Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilmember Douglas?
Oh, it's up there. I had the wrong button. Thank you. Thanks for the help. So obviously, on alternative number one, we can't afford all 7 segments. So we're talking about choosing segments from alternative one, and how many of those?
So with our budget and then also factoring in the additional 1.9 million that we can likely secure from CDOT, we'd be looking at 1, maybe 2 segments, depending on which segment or segments are selected. As City Manager Rogers highlighted, segments 2 and 3 would likely be the most beneficial. And there we're only looking at being able to handle one of those at this time. But we can certainly explore grant opportunities as they come up to get other segments designed and constructed. But the reality is that that's, not where we're at today.
Okay. So with alternative number 2, it would be the whole bundle of all 7 segments.
Yeah, so alternative 2, not going down the raised median route, we could, with our current budget, not needing additional funding from CDOT, could take care of all 7 segments as they were walked through in the various illustrations.
But it sounds like that would probably be more of a temporary fix, to me, anyway, looking at it.
Yeah, and as the maintenance issues come up, we have that to consider as well. And again, if we went that route, we could explore grant funding for alternative 1, but that takes time, right? 6 months to design, et cetera.
It's a little bit less of a barrier too. They can move through the delineators fairly easily.
Yeah. It won't stop a vehicle, it would just alert them that they're driving over that painted
Right, so I'm
median.
assuming that a rumble strip is like, if you go over it,
Yeah,
makes your
it's
car
like the
jump.
little bumps in the road
Yeah.
that you see.
right, like falling asleep on the interstate.
Yeah.
Okay,
Jerk your wheel ever so slightly.
which I wouldn't recommend. And I am also very concerned about those businesses on the east side, that the northbound, because I have seen lots of dangerous moves by drivers coming out of there. I mean, it almost seems like we'd have to have the median go all the way up to 104th to eliminate that from happening. But yeah, to me, that portion is extremely dangerous. And I feel like there's probably, because of the vehicles that are coming out of those businesses are larger, I feel like that it could cause a really dangerous situation sooner or later. And my last question then is, I guess that last one was a statement, but the question that I have now is, if we were to look at doing all these segments as future projects, how long do you think that would take?
Make sure I get my mic on. It's really just dependent on funding and grant resources that are available. There's new grant resources every year, so I'm pretty optimistic about it, and they're easier to get once you have a plan in place. So we have the plan in place. We have basically a shelf-ready plan that needs to go to design. That opens a lot of doors for us, so I would be optimistic about it, but it's very dependent on that.
And then again, keeping in mind that if we did get the grant, we'd still have to do full design and construction. So we could be seeking out these opportunities, but it would take several years for everything to come online.
All right.
But it's possible.
Okay, thank you. I really wish that, and I don't know which segment that would be, the going up to 104th?
That would be
but-
segment 4.
Segment 4, okay, but you're saying that segment 1 and 2 are the,
I think 2 and 3 are where we currently have some overlapping high hazard zones in which we've identified raised medians, a combination of raised median treatments that you've seen within the exhibits. You raise segment 4, which has validity in its own right due to some of the businesses that are utilizing wrong way movements to be able to access the site. So, that creates some traffic concerns and challenges there as well. If trying to look at this in a pragmatic function, it's probably starting with segment 3 and prioritizing or phasing to looking to get funding for section 4, and then coming back and tackling section 2, which then gets you from Quebec Parkway up to 104th. And you're at least still tackling one of the major high hazard zones that we've identified that have obviously had significant speeding when we brought that forward. And then you're dealing with a condition in which people are leveraging because of just how we have, I don't want to call it a broken median, but we have a gap that's available that allows for different functionality and different movements, right? But as Mr. Maxwell stated, there's always new funding available. So, right, even though we're tackling it now, there may be other resources that come along that allow us to accelerate getting to segment 4 and then coming back and dealing with segment 2. The beauty of it is that you have natural breaks with the intersections at Highway 2 with 104th, Quebec Parkway, and 88th, so where it's not going to create additional issues with how to be able to do construction in different phases. So there is some thought behind that.
all right, thank you. All 3 of those are about the same price range or cost. So I think that that could have some kind of impact on it as well. So, all right, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Dukes.
Thank you. I kind of want to throw out the idea. I like the idea of being able to complement what's already happening with high hazards. And so with this, thinking about segment 2, as well as all the alternative number 2, based on that, we'll be able to do 1.8 and then the other one's 2 million or so. We could create a budget where you could do both. My concern, and I understand the rumble strips and delineators. I know the delineators specifically probably have a little more maintenance, but the rumble strips are still an effective use to say, hey, you're wandering off or you need to get back on track. And my concern is up north, there's a lot of speed in an area. If we don't do anything sooner than later, it's creating a lot of hectic. So I would recommend thinking about segment 2 to complement what's already happening with high hazards and putting it in the medians, and add in the rest of the rumbles, strips, and delineators. But that'll be my preferred. If we can't do that for whatever reason, I would recommend just sticking with segment 3 from my vantage point of, hey, let's go ahead and try to complement what's happening in high hazard zones and look at this as an addition to our city to try to make sure that we are doing something about the speeding across the city.
Okay, thank you. Any other council members? Councilmember Teeter?
If we're giving are we giving recommendations on
Not yet.
now, or?
I think what we're looking for is there being, right, once again, given that this is
Oh, you can.
a very unique issue that I want to make sure that we're all aware and that there's, I'll call collaboration amongst, obviously, the policy pressures that you all feel from the concerns that we receive in the community, but also what we can deliver operationally. I want to make sure that we're on the same page of how to move this forward, because once again, as we start this project, right, there's going to be the feedback, there's going to be the comments being made. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a recommendation. It's trying to get a level of like I said, consensus and collaboration to what you all think we should be evaluating with the dollars and cents that we have with what you've appropriated and you've given us so that we can then go deliver. And we've identified how to be able to do that and which ones make the most sense so that we can then all go back to the community and say, no, this is the best way to address it, both from your roles and ours as members of the city.
Okay, saying that, I would be comfortable, since we don't have the money to get the job done, just put rumple strips all the way, the full distance, and get the speed limit back up to where it used to be when it was a 2-lane highway with no shoulders and no bike trail on there, and get traffic moving through our community. And because I think most of our accidents happen when people are distracted, which is basically the same as being drunk. You're distracted from the road, and next thing you know, you're in the wrong lane. And the rumple strips would remind them that they're going off the road, and hopefully bring it back before it's too late. But even the raised medians and stuff is, we don't know if you're going to be launching over them and stuff. So it's now a 4-lane highway with shoulders. It's come a long ways from the old days when it was just 2-lane, no shoulders, no bike trail. And I think it would be sufficient. That's my opinion. I'd be happy with just that for now until we get the money to put the medians in. That's all I got.
Thank you. Councilmember Chacon?
Thank you, Loves. Honestly, I prefer a raised median. I think the severity of traffic is too much, but I would like to prioritize from your recommendations. So you said segment 3, and then over a year to 6 months, then you'll go for segment 4 and then segment 2. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's based on what we're able to get from obviously the grant funding and as we look at additional appropriations in additional budget years. So it'd be phase 3, so segment 3, then segment 4, segment 2. Okay. And then start to work as we then see any additional traffic as it comes with some of the other segments as we see fit.
Can you do something in combination where if you're already doing this on one side, a duality of maybe strips on other spaces to subside other high hazard zones? So kind of working within that, I appreciate that.
We certainly could, and that's not a bad idea at all. It might be an opportunity for us to build as much as we could as far as the raised medians and put out some rumble strip and delineator sections almost as a beta test to see how well they're responded to, how difficult they are for maintenance crews to work with. We can report back to you and let you know what kind of responsiveness we're getting from them. I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
And then for the raised medians, how much maintenance will that be continually once you do put it in?
As long as they're not irrigated, I think the maintenance that Councilmember Ford referenced is key. When we have snowplows that tear up some of the curb and gutter, that's the biggest issue. The median itself is going to be either stamped concrete or stamped Bomanite. Not a lot of maintenance involved in that at all.
Okay. And then that'll be enough time to do the time frame to already work with the developers and city to prepare for each project with the grant, like to be able to have, let's say you're already working on section 3, within that time be ready for section 4, like you'll have enough time within the year to 6 months?
Yes, ma'am.
Confident, basically. I'd rather have the raised medians than, that's my recommendation.
Sure.
Thank you.
But for all of council, we could do a combination, and we could test out rumble strips and delineators and report back to you on a small section.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I had a question, and we're talking about delineators. That's a variation, because you have the poles, you have the humps.
Right.
So when you say delineators, can you be more
So
specific on
in
that?
Colorado, it's preferred to have the full pole version of a delineator. The little bumps on the road that are reflective are really much more difficult for snowplows to even see and then to make sure that they don't scrape them off. So those are almost non-existent. This would be the raised poles. It is easier for the drivers to see those, and it is clearer that it's an area that they're not supposed to be traveling in. It's not going to do anything to stop them from doing that, of course, but for the people who are obeying the law, it will be a reminder.
Okay, and then what about the poles and cables you see on the highway?
I'm sorry, say again?
The poles and cables you see on the highway?
Yeah, we're not talking about a cable system. That's completely different.
All right. So I would say start out with segment 4, to me, because Councilmember Ford was talking about, I see a lot in the north towards 104th, that those trucks leave those businesses on the east side, they go up and make a U-turn.
Sure.
And they do go the other way too, but I see a lot of times they see everything's clear and they will make a U-turn. Big trucks, all of them, no matter what's over there, they don't want to go up and, have to go around and all that. So they're just going to take the shortcut. So, and Dr. Cog has money too for transit improvement.
Yeah.
And they're looking at 120th. We just had the presentation last week with the county, and they're using money from CDOT. There are transit dollars right now. A lot of municipalities are not using.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but as I mentioned, once we have the plan in place, it makes it much easier for us. So I agree with you. I think it opens a lot of doors.
Okay. Well, I start out with segment 4, and then on segment 4, where there's a hill, because the other areas are pretty much flat until you go up to Sable, as it curves around up from 112th on around the curve.
Sure.
And that area there, maybe we should lower the speed through there. People don't need to be going, and it could be lower the speed as you're going down the hill as versus going up. So we need to do some changes there as well. Maybe through the high hazard. I know the police department was talking about like the camera vans, speed cameras.
Sure.
I think it's a great opportunity to remind everyone we're working on a safety action plan and transportation master plan that will look at issues such as that. And we actually have an open house tomorrow evening
All
if
right.
council or public would like to attend.
Okay, thank you. No, I appreciate that. I think we're going to do this. We'll just look for the long haul and do to me, raise barriers. The raised medians, but get away from the concrete, the stamp and all that. That's extra money. Just simplify it. We don't need to have, because people are driving, take the distraction away from stamp, concrete and all that.
Yeah, if I could just give you a little insight onto that as well. So we can move away from stamped concrete or stamped bomonite, and we wouldn't be able to landscape it because irrigating the median is way more expensive than stamped concrete. So we couldn't landscape it in a pretty way. We could certainly talk to people about some xeriscape that doesn't require irrigation. That may be cheaper, and I will certainly look into that. The team will, and get back to you on which one is more cost effective.
Right. I would say we just don't plant anything in those medians, especially on Highway 2. It's not necessary. Just because of the speed and everything.
Sure.
So that's my recommendation.
So if I may, Mayor, what I've heard so far, and once again, all great comments, there's definitely some diversity across the board with council. I've heard segment 2, raised medians, rumble strips. I've heard rumble strips the entire way. I've heard raised median. Section 3, rumble strips. I've heard section 4, raised median, rumble strips. So, like I said, there's no wrong answer. It's more about where does the body think we're going to get the bang for our buck and being able to address the concerns that you're hearing in your roles as our elected officials, and how we can then go apply what we have financially available to us and continue to look at that, right? The rumble strips, the delineators don't stop. Once again, removal and construction of those medians as we get additional funding in place. So today, where can we do, no pun intended, the most damage for what we've been set out and asked to do with what's being presented to you tonight?
So what's the full dollar amount right now we have to work with? Is it 4.3 million?
So we currently have 3.2 million budgeted, and then we anticipate having an additional 1.9 million available through CDOT, so 5.1 altogether. Yes. So this is the per segment cost for raised medians.
Okay. So let me ask a question, Mr. Maxwell. if we went with alternate 2, and as far as the delineators, could those be used some other place when we go to replace it with the barriers?
I'm sorry, so you're saying go with alternative 2,
And
the
then
rumble
as-
strips and the delineators on the entire corridor?
Well, yes, but then as we have the funding,
Oh, then replace them with
Then
the
replace them?
medians. I see. There's no reason why we couldn't. You're correct. We could certainly do the entire corridor, if budget permitting, with rumble strips and delineators, and then you're right, strategically remove them as we have funding for medians. That is an option too.
Sorry not to burst anyone's bubble. We'd have to prioritize a couple rumble strip areas too, because we'd only have $1 million left over. And doing rumble strips on the whole area minus segment 3 is still going to be over $1 million. So we could prioritize segment to get most of the segments taken care of. I just want to make sure we know that.
all right, appreciate that. And Mayor Pro Tem has a question.
I don't know how the mic goes. Oh,
It's on there.
it's on. All right, that takes care of that then.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't find this in the 5-year capital investment program. So I guess that was what my question was, is how this fits in with the other SIPs that we have scheduled.
That's a great question, ma'am. And if that wasn't in the 5-year CIP, I think it's purely an oversight. I mean, obviously, this project's been one that's been contemplated since the winter of 2022. It's obviously taken us a while through 23 and 24 to get to this stage. But it's my understanding, excuse me.
These funds are already appropriated. The 5-year plan is prospective, so futuristic over the next 5 years, but the funds that Jenna is speaking of tonight are.
So the funds are already available. We appropriated them in past years. That 5-year plan is looking at new allocations, and this particular project is already an active CIP project that Mike McGoldrick and his team are actively working on.
She said it more eloquently than I did.
It wasn't part of 24 to 28.
So, further simplifying, since we've already started working on this, it's already considered a project underway. What you're finding in the 5-year, 24 to 28, are projects that we want to start or will eventually transition to once we have the funding. So that's why you're not finding, is because it's a project underway. The 5 years looking at those that we want to start, starting with 25, and then as things roll off and as we transition, the things that are in the bullpen, on the waiting list, will move on to the active list, and those in the further horizon will move up.
Then what year did this begin? Was this approved? What year was it approved for the
It was
start period?
approved in December of 2022.
Okay. I just want to be able to understand how we are spending all of the money for all of the projects that must be accomplished in Commerce City and how we're going to achieve all of these. I think that was my greatest concern, and I would like to apologize to everyone for being late this evening. Oh, one more question. How much was approved in 2022?
We have $3.2 million available.
3.2 million was initially approved?
Yes, and then we have the additional potential fundings through CDOT.
Okay, and how much more is approved? Or,
Nothing additional has been approved. We have the 3.2 million, and then there's the potential to enter into an IGA with CDOT, which we're actively working on. That would take us from 3.2 to 5.1 million.
okay, so 5.1 is part of these segments then? Can be applied towards these segments?
Yes, the 5.1 can be applied towards the segments.
Thank you.
Hey, Councilmember Dukes?
Yeah, just going to City Manager's Rogers' comments around just direction from the council, and I'm gonna throw it out there because what I'm hearing, and actually I like the idea, if we're able to do the rumble strips and delineators and look at a section and say we focus on whether section 4, we may have enough money to actually do both, and then be strategic about how to implement other sections for segments in the near future. I think for me, that would cover some of the big concerns around speed. And I know the delineators don't stop folks from running, but a median won't stop either if they're going fast enough. And I think the message it sends to our city that we are taking actual steps right now, whether they're temporary right now for some parts, it shows that there is action moving for concerns we've been hearing for the last year or so. So if we could find a hybrid of section 4 or section 3 plus the delineators minus whatever dollar amount it is for alternative 2, does that make sense? And then figure out the dollar amount, that would be preferred for me.
And staff could certainly work to optimize what we get out of the money we have available now. We could maximize delineators and rumble strips as much as possible, and if there's potential to build in some sections of medians, do that as well. So we could certainly come back to you with a maximized, optimized spend on it.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is internal audit report of emergency rental mortgage utility assistance program. Invite Jim Tolbert, city assistant city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Just want to introduce this. Several months ago, Council asked that we have an audit done of the ERAP program to look at how the funds were spent, what parts of the community the money went into, and we've done that. It was performed by our finance department team and a couple of their auditors on the team who I think did a wonderful job in going through the records, working with the Housing Authority to see how those dollars had been spent. I'd like to turn the first part of the presentation on the actual audit over to Tyler Magnuson with Finance Department, who is the one that led that.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me this evening. The internal audit was conducted by myself and my colleague, Julie Reckert, who also works with me in the finance department. The objective of the internal audit was to assess the integrity of the transactions processed during the 2023 fiscal year and first quarter of 2024 as related to the CCHA objectives, goals, and guidance and participation for participation in the program. The scope of the internal audit included review of how the program was communicated and promoted throughout the community to ensure equal opportunity to those needing assistance. Additionally, we reviewed governance and assessed policy, procedure, and guidelines for participation in the program, as well as oversight, approval, and authority prior to disbursements being issued. Compliance included a review of case files and compliance for the stated guidelines of the program. Our review included such things as address testing, verifying vendors, and assessing oversight of oversight and review and approval, as well as supporting documentation included in the files. Lastly, the reporting and outcomes of the program. We gathered and assessed data to report program outcomes in order to help evaluate the program equity and effectiveness. Additionally, we included our observations and recommendations for the future programs. So To gather information and draw conclusions, we relied on interviews with the administrative staff, as well as review of documentation and data analysis. We reviewed all cases with disbursements of $10,000 or greater, of which there were 5. We then reviewed an additional 18 cases, which were randomly selected, for a total review of 23 cases. The objectives and the review of everything is contained in our program reporting and outcome detailed report, as well as our findings and recommendations. There are 2 program outcomes that I'd like to really call attention to. The first is that approximately 74% of funds were dispersed to households that are designated as extremely low income, which means 20 to 45% of AMI. The second reporting outcome I'd like to highlight is that out of the 180, so approximately 79% of rental assistance went to households in the core city. All of our other findings were summarized in our document, which was sent over to management.
Okay. Thank you, Tyler. One of the things that they did in the report was make some recommendations on how we might improve our operating procedures moving forward. And in your agenda information was a set of revised procedures, but just to hit the highlights. One thing is we did take all of the audit recommendations. They were recommendations for improvement. They weren't necessarily pointing out that there was any error, but they did recommend some things that they thought we need to do to tighten it up. We did put a program purpose section on the operating procedure. We placed a limit on the amount that a single household could receive within a 12-month period, recommended $8,000 there. We did develop and just articulate specific application requirements, trying to keep it simple but basic enough that we could make sure that the people that were receiving assistance were truly in need of assistance. We also defined hardship, which had not been defined previously, and included additional options for documentation of that to give folks a way to show us that they truly were meeting the hardship standards. We included priorities for assistance, primarily elderly, very low income, and disabled being the top of the list. And we added follow-up provisions, which is one thing that was not in the previous program, is to check back in 6 months with the people that had been funded to see where they were and just make sure that they, the funds had helped them and done what we thought they would, and to work with them if they needed any assistance of any type moving forward. That's the part that I think was lacking and stood out to me the most when I started reading the results. And then we did include all the audit recommendations as we felt like they were appropriate. So that, I think we've got opportunity for any questions or discussion.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Noble.
Thank you so much. And clearly the need was there. I love the recommendations. You did a fabulous job on those, great criteria to go by. I really do appreciate that. I think that will make a difference going forward in our ability to help as many people as possible, and also to determine whether it has been successful and how we can improve it moving forward by having this 6-month check-in as well. Should we ask for further grants to help this program, that kind of evidence will be really useful. So thank you very much for that extra effort. I'm glad that we actually went through the process of an audit in order to get us to this point. Thank you so much.
Any other council members have questions? Yes, I appreciate the efforts that you guys have brought forward. People who have been in hardship situations, And it's difficult for people to ask for help. And it's nice that the city, even though some receive more than others, at least we really help people out. And that was the purpose. So I do appreciate the fact that we do have a program and that we can work on that. So thanks again for doing that. Councilmember Douglas, did you have?
Yes, I want to thank you for doing this as well. And I really do believe that by having this audit done, that it will help us get funding for the future. So I think it was well worth the effort. And thank you for also, again, coming up with the recommendations as the Mayor Pro Tem pointed out. So I appreciate you coming up with this. And I know it was a lot of work, but it is appreciated.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Noble.
I just wanted to add one more thing. Did you mention how much that was, Assistant City Manager Tolbert? It was 500,000, right? That overall, that was part of the rental assistance program.
The audit amount that they covered was $996,000, almost $1 million.
Yeah. So I did just want to make that clear, especially to council members who weren't here at the time, is that was what the city council did to try and help ensure that residents of Commerce City didn't fall into homelessness. It was something that we did with the federal dollars that were provided during COVID, and I really appreciate everyone supporting that effort. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, up next is 2023 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. Teresa Wilson, Finance Director, please come forward to make your presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, City Councilors. Teresa Wilson, the city's Finance Director. Thank you for the opportunity to present the city's 2023 audit information. Materials in your packet include the financial audit presentation, the independent auditor's letter, which summarizes the auditor's opinion of the city's financial statements and related notes to the financial statements, the single audit report, which details required work related to the use of federal funds, the management's discussion and analysis, which provides a high-level and user-friendly summary of the city's 2023 financials. Plant Moran is the audit firm hired to complete the independent audit of the city's financial statements. This is their third year completing the city's annual financial audit. The audit is a lengthy process. It was even more lengthy this year. It began with preliminary and year-end work last fall and was fully completed on August 21st of 24. I would like to thank our finance staff for their efforts throughout the year. Completing the audit and financial statements would not be possible without their hard work. Hard copies of the 23 Annual Financial Comprehensive Report will be distributed once printed and available. In the meantime, you can find a link to the electronic version of the document within your council communication for this agenda item. Now it is my pleasure to introduce William Berkey, our audit engagement partner, to you. He is here with us remotely tonight and will present additional information on the 23 audit to you. And after that, we welcome any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you and good evening. Before I get started, I wanted to see, I know I was just let in as a panelist. One of my associates is with me today, Katarina Vilko. Wanted to see if she could be added as a panelist. She's on the call. If we can't, that's fine.
We may be having some audio issues with hearing Bill.
Can you hear me now?
Hang tight, Bill. We're getting help.
Good evening.
It's only $1,600 on my own pocket.
It's like Costco.
Bill, can you try speaking again, please?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, and you may proceed. I think Teresa is driving your presentation, so just let her know when you're ready to move to the next slide.
Perfect. Well, thank you and good evening. It wouldn't be a presentation without a little bit of a hiccup in technology here, so hopefully we got that out of the way. So as mentioned, my name is Bill Brickey with Plant Moran. I'm the audit partner on your account, and with me today is Katerina Vilko, and she's one of my associates who also participated in the audit. So as discussed, we are here to talk about the audit for the year ended December 31, 2023. And really, there's three separate items that we're going to cover tonight at a pretty high level. So we have the financial statements, we have the end of audit letter, and then finally we have the single audit, which is an audit of your compliance related to your federal grants. So we have covered all of these deliverables in detail with management. And our goal tonight is really to give you a high-level summary of that through this graph presentation that we're going to go through in just a moment. Before we get into the presentation, just want to take a quick moment and really thank your entire team for their help throughout the audit. So Teresa, Val, Tammy, really everyone that we dealt with at the city has been a pleasure to work with and really did a great job preparing for the audit and helping us complete it in an efficient manner. I always say, we take up a lot of their time away from their daily activities, but again, your team just does a great job helping us complete the audit efficiently. So the first slide we're going to go through here really is just a high-level summary. So we understand when you look at that financial statement document that's over 100 pages, it can be difficult to really decipher what's in there and what's important to be looked at. And so this slide really just breaks down the key components. So the main deliverable I provide you as your auditor is the audit report letter, which is on page 13 through 15, and I'll go through the highlights of that in just a moment. There's a management discussion and analysis section in there, which is 17 through 29, and really that's management's presentation to the users of the financial statements to verbally describe what happened in the current year. So understanding that everyone's an accountant, so that section's really meant to verbalize what happened in the city's finances for the current year. And then I'd say that the core audit information is included on page 31 through 78. This is where all of your funds are displayed, what actually happened in the current year, and all of the required disclosures included in the note section there. And then finally, the last two sections, there's additional budget information that starts on page 79. And then finally on page 125 is the statistical section, which is really a nice summary of about 10 years worth of information, both financial and demographic about the city, and kind of so you can see the changes there that have occurred. So as I mentioned, the main deliverable to you as your auditor is my opinion on your financial statements. And so again, that starts on page 13. And the city did receive what we refer to as an unmodified audit opinion, again in the current year. And that essentially means the financial statements are in compliance with all the rules and regulations. It's the highest form of assurance we can provide. And often we refer to that as a clean audit opinion. So happy to be able to provide that news. Also want to spend just a second and talk about this GASB 96 standard. So the city was required, along with all governmental entities, to implement a new accounting standard in the current year related to subscription-based IT arrangements. So think of your long-term software arrangements. So historically, what would happen is if you're paying for these on an annual basis or a monthly basis, the bill would come in, you'd pay it, and it was just an expense when incurred. What this standard did is really change the way that's accounted for. It doesn't really change how you budget for it or how you pay for it. But now if you looked in the financial statements, you would see there's a right to use asset recorded for the value of that IT arrangement. And there's also a liability related to that. So this standard really is just to recognize the fact that you have these long-term agreements in place. And so you'll see these new disclosures in the financial statements related to that. As far as the audit results go, overall the audit, was very clean. Things were ready for us, and it was completed in an efficient manner. But would like to talk about, the timing. So, typically the audit's completed by June. I think historically that's always happened, and that's the expectation. But in the current year, we ran into some unforeseen challenges related to the Commerce City Housing Authority. So the Housing Authority is a component unit of the city, which essentially means because of their structure and their governance and the fact that City Council appoints their board, their audit goes into your financial statements. And they are audited, they have a separate audit. And so although the city's audit was done in June, we couldn't issue it because we needed the Housing Authority audit and their numbers to be included in the city report. So a bit of an unusual situation that they had the delay this year. And we'll talk in a little bit about an audit finding related to their to that issue. But ultimately, that did cause a delay, and that's why we're speaking here in September versus June. So as far as net position, so we're going to kind of talk about some numbers now. So, looking at some of the key financial data. So again, this is right out of the financial statements, just some high-level summary. And so this slide we're looking at here is the net position for an 11-year period of the city. And we talk about net position. This is really the entire city's finances wrapped into one graph. So we're not talking about the general fund. We're not talking about specific funds, but overall, what's the city's total net position? And again, net position is sort of another word for equity. So what's your net position there? So you can see, since 2013, you've really been on an upward trend here and ended 23 with a net position of $493 million. And, as we look at the increase over the last 10 years, it's really just been driven by the overall growth throughout the city. I mean, you've experienced significant growth in your community. And just to put this into perspective, in 2014, so 10 years ago, the total revenue for the city was $85 million. And in 23, it was $190 million. So it's over doubled, it's doubled in over 10 years. And really, this growth has allowed you to invest in the community, into capital assets and infrastructure, as well as build up some cash reserves that can be used for future operations and projects. So the next graph we're just going to take a look at. So I referred to the net position. So how did it change from last year? So the net position of the city did increase $55.1 million in 2023. Compared to 2022, when the increase was $28 million. So we've really seen like a $27 million additional increase from where you would have been in 2022. And so as we look at, okay, why did that happen? What changed in your revenue and expense structure to increase that number? And really just came down to a couple items. So one, we saw an increase of about $8.6 million in charges for services. And the primary driver of that increase was increases in both impact fees and plan check fees. So again, I think the growth is really spurring the increase in that line item. And then probably the largest reason for the change was your investment earnings increased about $32 million in 2023 compared to 2022. Now, this is a little bit unusual because in 2022, you actually had investment losses, and a lot of that was driven by the market. So if we think back to December 31, 22, the market wasn't in a great place and interest rates were going up. So some of the value of your investments had some pretty substantial unrealized losses. And so a lot of that was recovered in 2023, and your overall investment income was about $15 million in the current year. So those were the main increases. Those increases were somewhat offset by decreases in some capital grant revenue from last year, and then also some overall increases in expenses, about 6% over last year, I think primarily driven by the inflation that we all experienced in 2023. So now I want to move on and talk for a minute just about the general fund. So again, this is really just looking at the general fund, and we're going to talk about fund balance. So fund balance in the current year increased $17.5 million over 2022, and you ended 2023 with fund balance of just shy of $104 million. And as I compare those results to what was budgeted, The city actually budgeted to use $3 million of its fund balance in 2023. But as I mentioned, what actually happened is you added 17.5 million. And the reason for that is your revenues exceeded budget by about $15 million, while your expenses were under budget by about $5 million. So again, you did better on revenue than you expected, and you spent less, which caused you to add $17.5 million versus using $3 million there. When we talk about fund balance, there are different categories here, and I just want to highlight some of the top ones. So again, although your total fund balance is just shy of 104 million, there's 52.9 million of that which is unassigned and available sort of for future capital or future operations. I'm going to kind of go in reverse order here. So as we move up the slide, you can see what the different categories are of these restrictions on fund balance. So we have this assigned group here, which has a variety of items in here. And this is management's plan to spend fund balance on future items. And so you can see the various categories there. Those items can be changed, but as of now, that's the plan. Then there's also the restricted portion of fund balance, which this includes the table reserve of $4 million, and then the capital outlay and operations reserve of $11.5 million. And that really relates to the 2K restricted sales tax collections that have not been spent yet on projects. So again, typically when we look at fund balance, we would look at what's available to spend. That would be the 52.9. And then the others, there's already either restrictions on that money or future plans for it. But again, overall, at the end of the day, the city, really had, positive operating results, and continues to be in a sound financial position. So I think, given the governance and some of the positive variances on the budget side, you've really been able to build this fund balance, which hopefully provides you more flexibility in future budgets as you continue to work on projects and operations throughout the city. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Katarina. We call her Kat, and she's going to go through the final two slides here.
Thank you, Bill. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So auditing standards require us to communicate a variety of items to the City Council and the Mayor at the end of the audit. Any issues that we would have experienced, we would have noted in here. So we are happy to communicate that we noted no issues, no transactions entered by the city that lacked authoritative guidance. We noted no significant transactions that have been recognized in the incorrect period. And we encountered no disagreements with management or had any difficulties in performing the audit. As a part of this communication, we are also required to report any deficiencies in the city's internal control. As Bill mentioned, because the city reports the Commerce City Housing Authority in its financial report, we need to inform you of one finding, a material weakness that was noted by the authority's auditors. The finding related to the timeliness of the authority's year-end financial information, and as a result, their audit was delayed, their completion, as well as the city's completion of the financial statements. As mentioned by Bill, the city also needed a compliance audit this year, where the city spent approximately $3.5 million in federal grant expenditures when combined with the housing authority spending, which is more than the threshold required that requires an audit. The compliance audit focuses on allowed uses of the monies under the federal guidelines. We tested one program this year, which was the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. The city spent about $580,000, and the housing authority spent about $1.9 million. We provided the unmodified opinion on this program, which is the highest opinion we can provide. As noted on the slide, we had no federal award findings or internal control deficiencies related to these funds. And that's all we have on the presentation. Thank you very much for your time, and feel free to let us know if you have any questions.
All right, thank you. Any council members have questions? Mayor Pro Tem Noble?
Thank you very much for the presentation, and congratulations for having such a successful audit. That's really wonderful. I really appreciate that. I don't really have any questions. I hope that on our next audit, though, we'll show an increase in capital grants and contributions as opposed to a drop of $3.2 million. That was one of the reasons that we moved $1 million of ARPA funds into a grants program, was to ensure that Commerce City takes advantage of all the opportunities that the federal government has been offering the last 2 or 3 years. So hopefully we'll see an improvement there, but otherwise, thank you so much for a great job. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You other council members have questions? I had a question on this material weakness report by the Housing Authority. Could you explain that in more in detail? Or
Sure.
speculation on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, essentially what happened is when the audit firm, which again, it actually is Plant Moran, but it's not it's a totally separate team. So as part of the audit, the expectation is when we start the audit, obviously we're provided the information to be able to, verify the numbers and do our testing and things like that. And there were significant delays on the Housing Authority side to be able to get, I'll call it, auditable trial balances provided to the team. And then when they were provided, there were a variety of errors that needed to be corrected before the statements could be prepared and the audit could be finalized. And so as part of that process, we are required to say, okay, we tried to do the audit, it wasn't ready, so we have to report to those charged with governance, in this case you, that the numbers provided to us were not correct originally, and there were assistance needed to be able to get them into a condition where they could be audited, and thus an audit report could be issued. And I do believe that they've had staffing changes over there that has kind of contributed to this delay and issues.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. I had a question on this assigned, the safeguard reserves, operating reserves. Now, the city is allowed to spend those dollars as needed?
Only with council approval. It sits in fund balance unless it's appropriated, but per our fund balance policy, that's based on a calculation, and it's largely based on ensuring we have sufficient funds available during an economic downturn to maintain our debt payments.
Okay. Yeah, that concerns me, that's a lot of money. And how can we make sure that we're spending this money wisely, and, we're not sure if we're going to be hit with another pandemic?
Absolutely.
And how will we ride that one out?
And that's based on a precise fund balance policy approved by former councils to make sure that we had funds set aside and stored up to maintain debt payments, since we do carry a significant amount of debt in the case of an economic downturn. So it's reserved for a very specific purpose. It can't be used for just anything.
Okay. And if we do use these reserves, when do we have to replenish those?
There's not a specific replenishment policy. It's just based on a calculation of, is it 50% of our debt payments and part of our operating budget? But we can spell that out for you and provide detail for it. It's printed in the budget book on an annual basis, but we can send that out as a refresher.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Douglas?
Thank you. I'm hoping that I can ask this question correctly so that it makes sense. I'm looking at the federal single audit slide, and it says federal expenditures of $3.5 million. But then when it comes down and talks about ALN 21.027 coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds, it says that the city received, and I assume spent, $580,000 And then the Housing Authority received 1.9 million. And I'm assuming that was spent. That doesn't add up to 3.5 million. And did the audit include looking at how those dollars were spent, like through the Housing Authority? And then 580,000 isn't a real significant number. It's half a million, a little over half a million. But yeah, so can you explain some of this?
Absolutely, and our auditors can chime in with additional detail, but the 580,000 on the city's part were ARPA dollars. The vast majority of that was the $500,000 that council allocated to rental and mortgage assistance. And then the 1.9 million was received by the Housing Authority from the county related to a housing project that they were working on. The combination of those, since the Housing Authority is part of our financial statements and reporting unit, they looked at that together. The balance to get to the 3.5 million is a variety of other smaller, much smaller grants, like, you know, the vest replacement program, CDOT revenue, and other things like that that are passed through from the federal government.
So I appreciate the fact that now we know where the 580,000 was spent. It was given to the Housing Authority. But what about the 1.9 million?
That came from the county to the Housing Authority.
Right.
And I believe that was for the Pinecrest purchase.
Oh, for the purchase of that property. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other council members have questions? All right, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Bill and Kat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going to do the 2025 City Council Budget Workshop. Invite Chris Johnson, Budget Manager.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to present once again to you all. Before we start, I would like to give a quick shout out to my staff. Both Caroline York is our budget performance analyst, and Pam Young over there is our senior budget performance analyst. They both do just great work, and I couldn't be happier with them as a team, along with great support from Teresa. I'm just very happy with the working environment here at the city. All right, so we're going to go over some quick staff recommendations. We're going to talk about what has changed. You just got a review of the general fund balance, so I'll go quick there, and then I'll show you how that rolls into our updated source and use data. Then we'll start going over supplemental information requested by you guys, and finish with the next steps. These next two slides are here because just to amplify the importance of what we need to accomplish tonight. This is the night we need to wrap up the proposed 2025 budget that we will bring to you all on October 21st. So as we currently stand with the budget, we would take that and add all the yes preliminary budget requests to the 25 budget, and that plus or minus any changes you guys make tonight will be what we bring back at the public hearing. The same thing goes for CIP. Right as of right now, the first year of the 5-year CIP will be included in the proposed budget, again, plus or minus any changes tonight. We will also implement the strategy proposed by Deputy Director Jenna Hahn a few weeks ago to focus on our active projects and on deck and horizon as our strategy to succeed in delivering those projects. As for what has changed since the last time we got together, we did a position budgeting refresh, which is our system that pulls in all salary and benefit data from any new employees or any employees that have left. We were able to sit down with HR and get revised benefit numbers for things like dental and health for what the amounts we're going to be paying in 2025. We accomplished a little internal reorganization, officially moving the community well-being division within the city manager's office. We had a few updated contracts from the police department. Took another look at revenues, and were able to add to our sales tax projection to help the source and use out a little bit, and completed our internal service fund and our 2K allocations. Again, this is just a refresh of the general fund balance where we sat at the end of 2023. You heard from the auditors, we had 52.9 million there, and then we were expected to use just over 4 million in the 2024 budget, along with ordinances passed this year, leaves us with a remaining unassigned fund balance of just over 38 million. And you can see from the 2K budget down there below, that is just over 6.3 million for the 2K fund balance. Looking at the source and use, you could we had 135 in total revenues, with a little over 130 in expenses, which gave us 5.3 to our general fund balance. When you look at the 2K portion, you can see that ate up the lion's share of that, with having an anticipated 3.6 added to there before budget requests. And in our non-2K portion, you could see the remaining 1.62 is expected to be added to fund balance before requests. As you see, once we added the preliminary yes requests, as well as our preliminary general fund transfer to CIP, we are showing that we'll have a 3.8 negative impact to fund balance. And with 2K, it's looking like we will add 2.9 million to fund balance after our 2K transfer. So as we get into the supplemental information, I'm sure you all heard about the House bill that passed the legislature and was signed by the governor last week. We've been looking into the effects on how that will affect our revenues. Just for a brief summary of the bill, it basically goes on the increase in statewide actual value. If it's over 5%, our residential assessment rate will drop to 6.15. If it's under 5%, it'll drop down to 6.25. If you're unfamiliar with how property tax works, it takes the actual value times the assessment rate times our mills, and that's how you get the property tax we're actually allowed to correct, that we actually receive. You'd see on the third point there that it sets an annual property tax growth of 5.25 for local governments, but because we are a home rule municipality, that will not apply to us. When taking a look at budget impact, I ran a few different scenarios. It's hard to know because we won't know the future assessment rates, but for at least 2025, actually Tabor will affect us more than this. Our Tabor rate is a 3.07, so it will have zero effect on our property taxes in 2025. And looking forward in the future, I would say it's going to be more of a limit of our growth. We would never probably see a revenue drop from this, but it might restrict how we can grow in the future on years that Tabor doesn't stop us. When we looked at our last 10 years of Tabor rates, that is actually a bigger barrier for us than the House bill as it currently stands. And just a reminder, property taxes only make up about 4% of our total revenues, so they don't have the impact that school districts and some other municipalities in the area will probably show from that bill. There was questions about a possible Safe Streets initiative. So a couple weeks ago, I got with Commander David Mowry from the police department, as well as Director of Public Works Larry Hassan and Deputy Director Jenna Hahn, to take a look at what kind of this program would look like and what they could propose. In those conversations, it was clear that Public Works was already doing some of the work, mainly some of the sort of data collection work. So I wanted to highlight the current efforts. Jenna spoke on them earlier about how there is a transportation master plan, which is more the long-term goal, working towards a vision zero and having zero traffic deaths in the city. And then the short-term plan is more the safety action plan, which is a lot of data collection, speed studies, and finding the hot spots where the crashes, and where basically looking at finding where the problem areas are. In that, they're having community input to help them decide that. On the public safety side, Their basic strategy would be one of education and then targeted enforcement. So the education portion would be, reaching out, community research, social media, reaching out to the local neighborhood groups, getting speed studies and that data from PW to help find the areas where speeding is persistent and where accidents are most likely to occur. To get the education portion done, the hit to the budget will only be $3K. Then once those targeted air problem areas are found, then there can be the targeted enforcement. This program will include monitoring and ticketing to hope to ensure compliance. There's options put on there to help get that done. One of those would be a radar van. I'm sure you've seen those around. I see them in Denver all the time. This would actually be ran by the same company that does our traffic signal. We would not own the van. They would play it, but we would need to pay a certain amount each month, plus to have a VHE in the van, as the police department really doesn't recommend having that kind of equipment without having somebody monitoring. So the total of that would come to $142,000. There's also an option for off-duty directed patrol, where we'd basically have cops that are off-duty work overtime in those areas, and where they would specifically target and shoot radar and hand out tickets in those areas. Because of the overtime needs, it would come out to run that, I think it was about 30 hours a week, would be around $232K. There's also some signage that would be helpful that would come to around $4K. The total budget for the public safety side of this would run about $381K. I want to give a thank you to Commander Mowry for getting the information back to me so fast. We also had some questions about issues in the core city and possible programs to help clean up some of those areas. You see here a list of several ideas that were put forward, some of those being unbudgeted, and some of those actually already have a budget. There's some of the unbudgeted ones would be neighborhood trash cleanups and anti-littering campaigns, Jersey barriers and areas prone to dumping. I do need to make a amendment there. There would actually be 206 Jersey barriers needed, and the cost for that would actually be $81,900. So sorry for the correction on that. There would be a crack spraying program. They would still have to, go out for bid and things of that nature, but it's looking like that would be $100K to help spray the weeds in our public right-of-ways. Some of those, like removable and inoperable vehicles, there is a budget. It goes by need, and as well as the code enforcement of violations, there is already a current budget, and that goes by how much is necessary. The final one was an incentive to move back fences for homes that abut an alley. They asked for more time to get the financial estimates and work with CD to figure out how to get that done properly. I'd like to give a thank you to Alex Van Zant from City Manager's Office for getting this information back to me very quick. This slide was from one of our previous sessions. We brought it back so we could get a consensus agreement on what we would like the 2025 budget of our flat work categories to remain at. So this was just kind of a reminder that so we can talk about that and enhance the discussion so we can complete that budget. And now I'll pass it off to Jeff Maxwell to go over our initial looks at the Civic Center expansion.
Before you move on,
Yes, sir.
know that if, make sure, council members, if you have questions, note what page it's on. So when we have the discussion, you can ask to go back to such page. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chris. So I will just cover briefly the preliminary numbers we received from D2C Architects. That's the architects that are working on the police substation project in the Northern Range. So we reached out to them and asked them to give us some very high-level preliminary cost estimates to construct an expansion of this building, the Civic Center, to accommodate, as you can see, 300 people. We made some assumptions, 150 square feet per person and 30% of common space, 30% for electrical and circulation components as well. So to expand this building to accommodate 300 people, we need about 72,000 square feet according to the architects that we engaged on that. Next slide. This is just to give you an idea of where that building would lie. It's the green sections on the bottom that's the grassy sections that are to the west of the existing Civic Center now. It's a natural place for us to expand that building, and I believe that was the original intent for that area when it was first constructed. If you look to the northwest, there's an expansion too of the parking lot. That's the orange section on the top of that slide. And this is just looking at it from another angle, showing you those grassy fields to the west of the existing Civic Center and how that building would naturally expand to the west if we so choose. So the architects reached out to several contractors to get real-world pricing for the 70 some odd thousand square feet that we might need for this building. Looking at the lowest cost architect one and the highest estimate there, it's around $45 million. That is for construction and some of the off-site work. That does not include the soft costs. The soft costs are detailed in the next few slides, and you can go ahead and move on to that one. A little bit hard to see. The total amount with the soft costs is around $61 million. Again, very, very preliminary numbers, but we did reach out to contractors to try and get the best current conditions for that. And this is just showing the escalations that we have been finding in the market right now, roughly 7% per year for each year that construction is delayed. So obviously we wouldn't be able to construct immediately. We'd have to design and go out to bid. And so we would need to factor in escalations for every year that we have to push out the actual construction. Want to talk about funding?
Yes, talk about funding options. So part of the thing that we also just didn't want to give you is what is the cost of construction, but we also wanted to give you what we believe are, or the only available option in being able to fund a project of this magnitude based on the information that we know. And as you have heard at some level of extensive discussion tonight around our fund balance, obviously we do not have the liquidity or the capacity within our general fund balance to be able to provide full funding for a project of this kind, nor would we make that fiscal recommendation, as it would not be in the best interest of the fiscal health of the city. So it really only leaves two other potential avenues, one being a sales and use tax revenue bond, which would have to go out to the vote of the people. Obviously, there would have to be a level of, I'll call it campaign work, understanding about the temperature that the community may or may not want to place into this. And obviously, once again, it's increasing the tax rate for those, both from a sales and a use tax, and whether or not that's something that would be palatable or appetizing to our residents, business owners, and the sort. So it really then only leaves our certificate of participation, or what we call COPs. We have taken it out in the past, COPs, on other projects. However, it does require you to have to put up some collateral, and that collateral would or could be one or both of our rec centers, in being able to ensure that we'd be able to make our annual debt service. For a building of $61 million, the annual debt service would be around $4.5 million over a 30-year period. You've also heard that as we're currently bringing in our various sales and use tax over the course of the year, and what we are having to supplement from calendar year 24 to 25 and so forth from 23 to 24, we do not have, once again, the capacity to take on any additional debt at 4.5. So we would have to find that additional revenue to cover this debt. So it'd have to be looking at potentially reducing other programs, whether it's trash, whether it's services that we're providing in pavement maintenance. I use those as an example of that, right? If you want to be able to bring something to this fruition at 4.5 million, we're gonna have to find other sources on a more regular basis to be able to cover that for a 30-year period. There's another piece in here that I want to be able to highlight, which we're going to get into a much more detailed conversation later this fall, and that's around the PD substation. And why that's important is that we most recently got updated figures based on continuing to size the need of that facility in the Northern Range for PD, that where we currently have funded around $17 million for the PD substation, what the market is bearing to our architect, and ultimately what we'll have with you, and we're trying to dial that in even more, is that we're still 21 million short. And the reason is that the going rate in the market for such a specialized building is around $1,200 to $1,300 a square foot. So there's going to be some decisions that we need to make with respect to that building in the Northern Range, and whether or not the methods that have been identified on this screen, really sales and use tax revenue bonds, certificate of participations, are going to be a necessary mechanism to help bridge that gap. Now, once again, 61 million is at 4.5. 21 million is going to be somewhere around 2.2 to 2.5 million in annual debt service. So easier to swallow, but once again, we're still working through those numbers. We just received those numbers after the publishing of this. So it is important that you all are aware of that, because, right, you start to take on some competing priorities around the Civic Center expansion or the potential police substation. Now, with all that being said, there is an opportunity of still being able to look at the design of a Civic Center expansion to address the growing need. And what we've discussed, I think as much as 3 weeks ago, how to be able to bring everybody back underneath of one roof and being able to think about the continued growth of the organization in response to the growth of the city. The design, if you go back for me, Chris, back to slide 22, and you're gonna have to squint, unfortunately. So slide 22, keep going back to the cost opinion, right there. Under H, it would cost around 4.5 million in order for us to design what that expansion building would look like. And in that, we could be able to discuss what a phased approach would be towards that facility. But it would cost you around 4.5 to be able to get to a design that ultimately, once certain things change within the market, we would be able to take out the bid. But if anything that I would suggest, if that is something that you all are seriously wanting to consider, would be first to go through the design process and to look at how that could be phased. Because obviously we're not going to need 72,000 on the front end, but would be able to build towards that capacity in the long term for what we see as our total growth. Right now, that 300 additional employees from where we're at is what we see based off of the most recent growth and where we project out to the end of 2045. So, right, this is looking at a 20 plus year growth model for us as an organization in relation to the city growing. So I know that's a lot to swallow, but this is where we stand with what we were able to bring forward to you all right now. And why I say if you wanted to move forward with the design option, at least for where we stand, it'll allow for the dust to settle with where we are at with the 6th floor, with the 2 substations that we're going to be entering it, or the additional substation lease we're going to be entering into in the Northern Range at the Turnberry Marketplace, in addition to the one that we have at Tower and 104th, as well as we continue to make the changes here based on the shift of the department out. We'll get a better sense, plus that design aspect does, when those pieces could easily be moved together, and as we continue to right size what we need in the Northern Range, what that cost may reflect as well.
All right, as we wrap up, I just wanted to put this review of fund balance. This shows what we showed earlier, just showing our initial just over 38 million in unassigned fund balance, as well as what we're using for the CIP transfer, our yes requests, and backed out the initial general fund surplus we had. We are looking at a remaining unassigned fund balance of $34.1 million. Those extra lines in there are there for the reason. We just wanted to show that so we can highlight everything that happens tonight will have an effect on that remaining unassigned fund balance amount. We have an Excel sheet we can bring up to show that anything that changes tonight, how that will change and what our expected remaining unassigned fund balance will be at the end of the 2025 budget.
Chris, just very quickly, on average, how much do we put back into our unassigned general fund balance on an annual basis?
Average, I mean, it's been all over the place with the amount of council actions in the year. I would say 4 to 10 million, somewhere in that range.
Thank you.
Yeah. Additional items are subject to change as we wrap up the 2025 budget process. We'll obviously incorporate any additional changes per your direction tonight. We will still take a look at revenues and see if anything needs to change there. We will have one last refresh of our position budgeting data, including building all the added positions. If any other benefits insurance data will come back from feedback comes from HR, we will add that, and then we will also do our allocations of both the 2K and our internal service funds one more time. For the budget calendar next steps, there's only 2 left. We will open the public hearing on October 21st, and we will have the final budget hearing and hopefully the adoption of the 2025 budget on November 4th. So as that, we open it up to discussion. I just want to let you know department heads are sitting in the other room ready to answer any questions you guys may have. So I look forward to a good discussion.
Thank you. Councilmember Teeter?
Is this thing working? I just want to say from the get-go, 20 years ago when I was on council, that's before this building was, we had the land, that's all we had back then. But the councils in between then and now cut the city way short. And so I don't think you can plan on 20 years down the road. I think you need to plan on total build out for the city. In other words, before we're totally landlocked within our community, I think that's what we need to be planning on. Is it going to be 300 new employees or is it going to be 600?
So great question. When I say 2045, that's where we're currently estimating our growth and build out based on our urban growth boundaries. And as we see development as it's been growing to this stage. So we have to look at it in concert with what we've identified through some of our primary documents. That's the master transportation plan, our existing comprehensive plan. The updated one that you all will see next week is still contemplating full build out at 180,000 residents by that 2045 period. So we use that as a basis point for us in determining, how we've caught up, right? We saw an explosion of our staff over the past 3 to 4 years. We don't expect to see that because we're starting to get to that equalization level on the level of service and the growth rate to where we're not going to be adding 30 to 40 staff members a year. So when we think about from the administrative arm, which is where we're thinking about this building, right? In a perfect scenario, all of the administrative functions would move from this facility that we currently have will be shifted out under one roof, and you would actually have a designated court and police department that would then effectively take the remainder of this building. So in that, when we think about the existing 150 to 170 employees plus an additional 300 on top, knowing that on average we'd be adding another 10 to 15, max 20 a year, it gets us to that 300 range and that comfort level of a 72,000 square foot building by build out.
I notice also we're having to use the county's space for just the meetings that we go to on a weekly basis, either the county or Thornton or other cities, but Commerce City don't have those accommodations. So that's something else that we need to incorporate into our planning.
Yes, and I think that's where if you wanted to start with, and that's why I said not just jumping into the full kit and caboodle of 61 million, you start with the design process. Well, yes, it's 4.5 million, but that 4.5 million gives you the opportunity to vet what other components, whether it is a community center, whether it's a cultural center, whether it's additional space of how you think about it, that can be able to meet community needs as part of that overall project. And once again, project budget will go up. And these are, once again, numbers just looking at our staffing space. But that 4.5 is still going to give you a starting point on, okay, if this is the vision that we want to be as a city, if this is the where that we want people to understand to receive all of their variety of services, cultural, community, administrative. Once again, that is something that 4.5 will allow for us to really dive into.
And that would also, it would give us a way to sell it to the public. If there's so many nonprofit organizations out there, they have no place to hold meetings. And so I think when we build something, we need to build a place to where they can hold their meetings here at City Hall. And even if they have to pay rent for it, but at least it would sell it, you know, when it comes time to trying to get a bond or something passed for the money. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Noble?
I'd like to take a few steps back. First of all, I'm concerned about the whole reduction on every single level on roads. I don't know what page that was. So there we go. Except for sidewalk connectivity, everything else, and 10,000 up on Core City flat work. But otherwise, it's a reduction, even though we have more streets and more pavement and more sidewalks. So I do actually hate to see that reduction, especially since I hear so many complaints about it. We still have a lot of cracked roads that have not been taken care of. I can look out my front door and see it, in fact. But other people just in Ward 4 alone have the problem, and that's actually a new neighborhood, if you will, by comparison. So I can only imagine what the streets must be like in the older sections of Commerce City. So that's one section that I would like to see it increased. And then the other part is, and probably the three council members who have been part of the city council over so many years, the mayor and council members Ford and Teeter may have a better understanding of this than I do, but I've been on the council now for 5 years, and I would like to be able to see actual progress status. So I have these budgets, and it lists the capital improvement projects that are supposed to be done. It lists the year when they're supposed to be done. I would like to know that they were actually accomplished. One of the reasons that's important to me is because when we vote on something or it's on the agenda and I know we're going to vote on it, I let people in the community know that it's happening. And so I feel a great responsibility to see it through, to know that it's actually happened. And I'm concerned that we're not seeing things happen in a way that can satisfy the citizens of Commerce City. There's just little things like $100,000 was set aside to figure out an off-ramp from 104th onto I-76. And then for 2024, we added even more money was added to that as well. So it seems like something should have been done to have a study. That was what was supposed to happen in 2024, was a study. The whole area that we had a meeting about for our last study session, that one of Ward 1's constituents has talked to us about regularly. Those were supposed to be repaired sidewalks and the street widened and a whole list of things. That's in both 2023 and 2024 budgets. And the money says it's budgeted, but I don't see that it was actually accomplished. I'd like to know what's happening with, I know you mentioned it earlier, but the substation. There were supposed to be public meetings about the substation. We bought that property a long time ago. It's been sitting there vacant for some time without a status report. And now it sounds like maybe it won't even go forward. I'd like to know what the status is of 96th Avenue widening. where we are on that, when that's supposed to happen. I'd like to see some tangible evidence of the budget items that we approve and actually seeing them come to fruition that make a difference in our citizens' lives and that they talk about on a regular basis.
All right, so let me start with the 96th Avenue project. There's been communication to the council that a bid has been released. That's also been communicated to the community that a bid has been released. Once we are through that bid process, there'll be additional announcements on when construction, which is right now tentatively scheduled for November to occur. So there's been, like I said, direct communication to you all as a body as well as the community on where we stand with that. Let me be very clear. When we talk about roadway projects are not one and done in a year. What I've come to appreciate is that it takes approximately a 3 to 4 year period to get through the design, to get through the construction costing, and then ultimately get to completion. So while you may see a project on our CIP in 2021 and 2022, what we should be communicating to you all is an estimation of another 2 or 3 years to get to an actual deliverable or delivery outcome that is tangible for the community to use and to be able to benefit from. So adding a little bit of conjecture here as well, we've also communicated very clearly to past councils and this council is that we had well over 150 active CIP projects. To that, we continually add more new CIP projects, which once again, it limits our ability to be able to deliver on the totality of what's already been asked of us to deliver and that we've been working on. So we're not making significant strides for those improvements. Now you talk about the 100,000 and adding additional money. What's not being communicated and something that we can be better about is that once we head down that path with CDOT, we are now committing ourselves to a project that we have to fully fund. So if it is 100,000 and an additional funds to do that study for an interchange, CDOT in discussions with us and Jeffrey, Mr. Maxwell can correct me if I'm wrong, they're going to be looking at, well, where is the rest of that money to take it from design to construction? And that interchange is going to be around 30 million. So we also have to be strategic in when we think about the execution of that type of study so that we have the funding in order to support that. Now, once again, I will say that straight face, that's something we have to do a better job of communicating to you all within our CIP project and program folder. Absolutely. With PD substation, we're not at a place to go out to the community to have a conversation. We're still working through the internal process of what does PD need in that facility. And that takes time in of itself to make sure that we get that right? We talk about not shortchanging ourselves as to where that building and what that building needs to have, not in today's world, but in tomorrow's world of 2040, 2045. I have been very clear with my expectation to the chief to fully evaluate the needs in the Northern Range. To that, it's not been ready, it's not been ripe to have the conversation about how it could also provide additional support to our community. Hence, there's not been much of a status update for you. And quite frankly, working to this point last week, we're getting to a stage where we can actually have an informed, fruitful, and healthy discussion with you all as council as to what our next steps are and how to look at that. Yes, this project has been longstanding for the last 2 years, but it takes multiple years to be able to get significant infrastructure like this off of the ground. So I don't think anyone internally has looked at this as a quick win for the community, but one that we want to be due diligent in ensuring that we're delivering, that we don't have to come back to you in 4 or 5 years and say, I need to find another solution because we didn't plan accordingly for where the community needs us to be as they continue to grow in the Northern Range. And what I mean continue to grow, as we continue to add more residents in areas that we are going to have to ensure that we're meeting response times for.
Okay, I'd like to do a follow-up to that, please. I was at a community meeting last month for East 96th Avenue about the underpass. They didn't even have a monetary amount attached to that, so I'm not sure how quickly that's going to go forward. Groundbreaking yet on the park that's going to be on the south side of 96 by Second Creek that we had approved 3 years ago now, maybe at least 2 years ago,
ma'am.
2.5, 3 years ago. I think that when we bite off too much, that we don't get as much done as we could if we took littler bites. So if the Northeast isn't entirely built out yet, maybe it's a smaller substation at Potomac and 104th, and another substation over at E470 and 120th someday. Something like that I just am concerned that, let me put it this way, let's do it in a way that does keep us informed. So if we agreed to things on the budget for 2023, we agreed to things on the budget for 2024, and now you're asking for things for 2025, let us know where we are on 2023 budget items, on the SIP items. Let us know where we are on the 2024 items, because we're not necessarily adding these things ourselves. We're not necessarily adding a new city hall, for example, that would encompass everything. We haven't made that leap yet. That reminds me of the Justice Center that came up a couple of years ago, in fact. So I think that I would like to see where everything is before moving forward on some of these things. And on others, I'd like to see a case statement, just like you would do if you were doing a grant, that you're explaining what the need is and why you need the money for this and what it's going to do for the residents of Commerce City. That, I think, would help me make informed decisions that would be of benefit to the community, to our growth, to our future, and that would matter a lot to me.
So back on July 22nd, ma'am, you did receive all of that information about where we stand with our active projects and what we're proposing for 25
No, I'm
to 25.
talking about the ones that are in the budget.
Yes, ma'am, I'm talking about the same ones. So to that, you have had that since July 22nd. That was presented to you as part of our CIP active list and project list. Additionally, ma'am, we responded to the request to bring information about the Civic Center back to this meeting. That is what we've done. That's what we provided. We are not moving forward with anything unless there's direction from the body, if that is what you also choose. Now, as we stated, we are at a stage tonight where decisions have to be made in order for us to meet the state-required delivery of our budget. We have held 3 meetings with you all as council to present you with that information, no different than what you are speaking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Hahn, if we did not provide that to them on the 22nd.
We did, yes.
I'm cross-referencing now, thank you.
Councilmember Dukes?
Thank you. I know there's a decision that has to be made tonight, and so I will kind of walk through the presentation. Thank you. And also acknowledge that there may be an opportunity to have more budget discussions through the year, and we just think through our agendas and our work sessions and make this a priority even more, because it would help just to see the totality multiple times. I don't think that's a bad idea. I think figuring out the right balance of how do we keep this the priority as council, because fiscal oversight and policies, I agree wholeheartedly with that. When I think about this budget, thanks again for putting this together, and I want to just give feedback. I like the idea of slide 13, adding additional dollars to the police department to really be able to complement the Vision Zero as well as the safety action plan. And so I'll put that out there to say I think it's a great idea. I would like to move forward with that as a budget item with my colleagues in council. I think that's a great idea. I don't know if the radar van is the need right now, but I guess as a staff, I'm hearing you say that's a part of the opportunities to really bolster enforcement, right? And that's something we had in the past, correct? And so I think that's a great idea.
We've never had a police radar van in the past. It's something that we've been exploring operationally as the city, as we've renewed various contracts.
Okay.
So in that is something that we find as an opportunity in that new contract, which keeps us with the traffic signal radar monitoring over off of 60th and Vasquez.
Okay.
It affords us these other additional opportunities, but we have to pay for it.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I misheard. Maybe Councilmember Teeter was out there with his radar gun back in the day, but just that part of it, yeah. Go ahead.
We did have a radar van. I don't know who was contracting it. I thought our people were operating it, but we would even advertise where it was going to be and at what time of day it was going to be there. And if it wasn't there, you could actually get out of the ticket. I know my wife got a ticket and she got out of it because the van was advertised to be someplace else when she was speeding down the road, looking into the back seat, going over the speed limit, talking to her 3 girlfriends. But, I mean, that was back in the day, and it was a perfect picture. I mean, there was no getting out of it if they would have wanted to convict her. But, I don't think we should advertise where it's going to be. I think we should put the van out there to catch these guys that are just crazy drivers and get them off the road. But
Just to say, I like the idea. I agree. I like the idea with having a van, and I hear what you're saying.
they could roam around where the complaints are at.
Yeah.
If people are complaining, we got problems here, and at a certain time of day, I let them be roving to where they could go wherever they want to be, to where our citizens they better follow the speed limit or they're going to get a ticket.
Yeah, and then I hear City Manager Rogers means we have to engage in that contract and be able to look into it. So I personally like the idea, and thanks for putting it up there again as a body. If this is something we're interested in, I think it complements, and also it shows the public safety of our efforts as a city to invest in what we know is some big challenges right now with speeding and this trying to have a systemic approach to helping reduce this. I think that's a great idea. The other piece I want to add, so slide 14, based on our study session a couple weeks ago, was we did the numbers, about 45% of the violations was around trash in some form or manner, and having a trash anti-littering campaign, I know this is a minimum, I think it makes sense to try to start that process. Having the Jersey barriers at 66,000 makes sense, especially because the number of violations we had. And then continue to hear about the weeds. We also the Mayor Pro Tem's comments around seeing progress. I agree that at some point we got to see progress, and I think weeds also is a big issue around our city. We're not seeing the progress, so I think having efforts to reduce that makes sense to me as well. The last piece is the CIP updates. I am interested on how can we increase these, slide 15, how do we increase the dollar amounts to the budget, and how do we align the proposed budget to increase the dollar amount for 2024, or the budgeted amount for 2024 to increase it to align better to 2025?
So to your latter question, sir, what we would do with any additional enhancement beyond what you see now would come out of our unassigned general fund balance. So the additional 320,000 for concrete flat work would come out of our unassigned general fund balance to be transferred into our CIPP for that.
Okay.
For that line. Similarly, for the crack repair of an additional 250,000.
Okay.
So between those two lines, and pavement management, we would have to add another $1 million out of our unassigned general fund balance to those various lines to show that equity.
Okay. How we decide to go about it, if there's a way to do it to increase I think this is a priority for a city should be in terms of making sure the connectivity, the crosswalks, the crack repair across the city is something that I know in the past, talk about beautification of Commerce City, it's needed. And I think I would love that idea if this, again, at council, as we talk about it as a body.
So I think one of the reasons why we are capturing it on the spreadsheet is that if there's a general consensus of shaking heads right now, before we close out this item, we would go through each line item that was added to ensure compliance by the body or consensus by the body, so that when we open the public hearing, we have caught all of those items.
Okay, thank you, sir. The last comment I have is around the building expansion. And while I think it is essential to have our city hall and the city building to be a staple of our community and really show, I don't know if this is the right time to invest that level of dollars yet. I would prefer to wait on that as I guess I look at it in a way of like, as we show progress in the bread and butter of what needs to take care of the city, whether it's public safety in terms of traffic as well as streets, and then begin to look at the footprint in the near future for the Civic Center. And hopefully in that time, as we demonstrated the city and we demonstrated that we're making progress, it'll make it more favorable to look at an actual ballot initiative. Right now, I couldn't justify us expanding a civic center, even though I get it's the conversation, but when we talk to our residents, it's hard to justify when we see weeds and cracks and people speeding all the time and that. So I would prefer to wait on that, as my opinion, and then look in the near future. And I think the other part about waiting is we actually can talk about our more robust cultural center within Civic Center and how that can look like in the future. Because right now, what we know is not going to be the same, or what's going to be developed now 5 years from now might be so different in terms of technology and all that. So we might actually be in a better position if we think more about it. But overall, thank you for putting this together and listening to our comments during the study sessions and putting it in a PowerPoint. I guess my last question is around just the operational piece, and I see some of the staff considerations. And as a body, is this, you have this in a PowerPoint, is this the conversation you want us to have, or is this more the operational pieces in terms of, there's some that say yes or no, and who you decide to add, departmental increases in terms of staff? Is this something you just want us to be aware of, or do you want comments on that?
Not necessarily comments, because obviously, to your point, right, from a staffing perspective, that's within my wheelhouse. But obviously, you all get to make the decision on the appropriation, because most of these will be a budget enhancement, so it requires to be included into it. But the decisions on the functionalities of what's being approved, I've had discussions internally with my department directors on a handful of occasions on this, and we've had our own internal budget retreat. So there's understanding of how we are trying to balance a number of different needs, and understanding that those needs will obviously morph over the year as it leads into the 2026 establishment of the budget. But once again, we've got limited dollars and cents. We were able to make it work for the majority of departments.
Okay.
And we'll continue to do so.
Okay, thank you. I'll stay out the weeds on that and just the other comments. So thank you. Thank you.
The other council members have questions or comments? Councilmember Douglas?
I believe it was slide 22, and that's about the expansion of the Civic Center. I don't understand why design fees are $4.5 million. That sounds very excessive to me.
So typically and Jeff can pick me up where I fall down. Typically in the rule of thumb when it comes to construction projects is at a minimum to associate a 6 to 8% of the total cost of the project. So that's both the FF&E, that's the core and shell, So the 61 million, you would take between a range of 6 to 8% of what it would be required in order to develop that facility. We've had similar design costs for or will have similar design costs for the Buffalo Run Golf Course expansion that we've talked about. So, it's not uncommon when you start to get up there in numbers for a facility of this type that you're going to see that 6 to 8% be significantly higher as well.
But what do design fees cover? I mean, I'm hearing about the possibility of looking at like a cultural center and other things that you mentioned. So it just seems really ambiguous to me.
So I'll allow Jeff and his team to get more into the technical details. I raise community center, cultural center, other additional resource centers because I would assume that if this was to move forward, there would be a desire for us to have engagement with our community and pretty significant engagement with our community. In that, I would not be surprised if there's requests for community space or cultural space or the things along that line. And as such, if that's a desire by the council to continue to further as part of the design, that's where it starts to come into play about how does that thing get designed within the footprint of this, or do you then have to do additional buildings on city-owned space? I threw that out as a scenario, not necessarily with what was asked of us, which was just purely to look at what does your staff need as far as effective space to grow into over the next 20 to 25 years as the city builds out. But as we all know, as you go out to the community, we also have to factor in what the community's needs are as well.
I'm still not getting it, but, I guess it is what it is. And I would really also like to say that I would like to see some things at least in the works so that people can see things, so that they don't think we're just out there playing whack-a-mole and going after all these different things, but not seeing anything come to at least a start.
Yeah. I will say, when we did follow up on the presentation, Ms. Hahn, even though we didn't go through it, we are developing a dashboard that is going to be able to provide you up-to-date information where we're at with that project and when and where we anticipate that construction will be completed. And that will be accessible not just to council, but to the full entirety of our community. And will be in a position on our website that will be highly accessible to them to know where we stand with all of our projects, good, bad, or indifferent.
And I think a dashboard is good, but still, a dashboard is showing that something that's going to happen, not that it is. So seeing is believing, and if people can just see something happening besides, I won't go there. But yeah, I totally agree with the Mayor Pro Tem, and I think that's what Councilmember Dukes was also manifesting and saying that that's what we need. Or expressing, I guess that's a better word. Thank you.
Any other council members have questions for staff or comments? Councilmember Ford, do you have anything? Councilmember Chacon?
Saying the same thing, a little bit of reiterating. I did find it concerning. I don't want to cut costs where we're going to need the same things. What was it? 400K less on concrete flat work. We already mentioned that we need that type of maintenance to be maintained. And that's my concern. I don't want cost cut where we need that maintenance, if not more. And then I don't want us chasing pipe dreams for certain spaces yet. Like we need to, I think it was You'll have to hold collateral for Bison Ridge. Bison Ridge hasn't even been updated yet. So will this be that new structure would be collateral for a funding option for this new building, it said? Because you need to use another city facility or leased property as a collateral for the deal.
Thank you for the question. When you issue COPs, you have to put up what is called leased property, or collateral is what other people think of it as.
Yeah.
And that is listing another existing facility in order to secure that issuance. It could be one of our rec centers, but it could also be the newly built structure as well. We would just have to identify that as we're working through the COP process.
Yeah. I guess my concern is we're still addressing Bison before we build the Civic Center. So it isn't that I'm against it or not wanting to have that path, but I want to see an updated list as well. I am looking at the CIP, but it's hard to track all of them by every year. Even as another council member, we're gonna have another election pretty soon. Like, how can we make sure that we're maintaining, no matter who fills these seats, that they know what's going on every year about what projects are being done and what isn't?
Absolutely, ma'am. And it wasn't lost on us when we heard that when we came to you all on the 22nd, and then had a follow-up conversation with you all in regards to how to best share the information of where we stand with existing projects, what we want to take on for new projects, and quite frankly, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, we're not adding a lot of new projects to our CIP. We are repositioning projects that have been sitting out there for a long period of time and trying to demonstrate what you've just said. How do we get to the finish line on those? We do have identified new projects, but those are sitting in the, I keep forgetting, not the active list, but
On deck.
the on deck. And then we have projects which we know we do not have funding for, will not have funding for in the foreseeable future, that will be in the horizon list. This is complex even to those who even work within our organization, because there are a lot of different moving pieces for a project. As it starts from design all the way to construction, and there's different things and different parties that we have to work with. So we are attempting to try to find ways to simplify the message, to communicate that in both interactive and iterative forms for all members of our community. Are we going to get it right on the first try? No, but we are going to be due diligent in making sure that what we do put out there tries to hit those various tenets that we've heard tonight. And like I said, that's all stemming from our conversation back in July. So we are attempting to make those strides.
If I could also just address a couple of you who brought up comments about the flat work. Can we bring up the flat work slide?
You just passed it. You passed it.
There we go. There we go. Thank you. Director Hassan is not here tonight, so I will articulate what his thoughts were behind these changes. The city dramatically increased the budget along these line items in 2023. I think you saw that from the finance presentation earlier, where Public Works was one of the anomalies that went up quite a bit, over $2 million that year. That was 23. We maintained that in 24. Director Hassan thought we might want to return to historical levels and bring it back below the 23 spike. The thought in 23, I wasn't here, but the thought was there were fewer construction projects planned for that year, so they wanted to use their time and increase these projects. I've spoken with Director Hassan. We're perfectly comfortable raising these. If you all are comfortable with that, we would love more money. So if you want to raise these, we can get it done. His thought was historically, he wanted to return to the historical levels before it spiked because we didn't have construction projects planned for 23. That was the thought.
That actually spurs the thought. During the budget for 24, part of that additional change was due to completing portions of Quebec Parkway for pavement management, and I can't remember the additional right-of-way that was discussed that was added, which that's where the additional 500,000 came from, was to complete those roadways.
And if I could just really quickly, Mayor, if you'd allow me to just share some good news. Do you want to talk about the Chrissy grant? Are we comfortable saying that tonight or no? Sure. Well, I've said it, so I'll let you break the good news.
Yeah, so we have received the $9.5 million Chrissy grant for 120th and US 85, so that's a huge milestone for us. The reason you haven't seen it in a grants report yet is we just found out this past Friday. Yeah, did you want me to say anything else, Jeff?
No, just wanted you to share some good
We're really
news.
excited about that.
Because I just asked for more money, so I thought I would piggyback with that.
Councilmember Ford?
Thank you, Mayor. Just looking at this, I've sat through a lot of these over the years, and there comes an opportunity, it's a wish list. You have all these ideas. You want to start throwing money at a lot of different things. And, thinking about some of the meetings that we've had and concerns that we've had, I think there's a lot that we need. Right now, we need to produce for our residents. And we talk about the sidewalks up north, that the roots are busting and the impact on our residents, tree trimming around our signs, just general cleanup and building pride in our community. I mean, it's easy to say, yeah, you know what, a new civic center sounds great, and when you start adding the costs on it, and I think about the golf course and what we're looking at and where it was when we started and where it's at today, and why some of these projects never get to the end goal. Sometimes it's okay to have a year where we start doing some of the basic things that our residents are really wanting to see, and save up more for next year to have a bigger pot of money to really focus on a larger project at some time. But if every year we burn up what's available and in wish lists, and it's a 10-year project, there's a lot of these projects, by the time you get to that point in time, that you still can't afford it. And so it never gets done. That goes to some of the points that the Mayor Pro Tem was making, how some of these things haven't gotten done. Well, because we started throwing money at it 10 years ago, and inflation and cost. Right now, our residents, the last thing that they would want to hear is that we're contemplating a tax increase to put on the ballot for a potential city hall expansion. And I'm just speaking about how I feel about it. I personally feel like we should focus the money on making sure that our pavement's in good shape, making sure that we take care of some of those busted curb and gutters that are laying out in the road, that whether it's residents or non-residents that see that and they go, look, they can't even take care of that, It's those little things that we haven't paid specific attention to over the past few years because we've been thinking about big things. Basically, I think we need to get back to the basics and produce quality of our infrastructure and go back to trying to look at quality community for a lifetime and show the residents that we want to put money back into the infrastructure, beautification, and enforcement. And we also need to be cognizant that a lot of our residents are right now stretched as thin as they've ever been stretched before. And if they have a route that's busting their sidewalk, instead of getting a citation, we need to have a plan. I'd rather see trying to build on that plan on how we can have some substantial area to take care of some of the concerns that we hear on Monday nights from our residents. I get it. I'd love to do another big project, and I'm not against, continuing to do big projects, but every once in a while you have to step back and take care of general maintenance of stuff before you can say, hey, you know what, let's go on another trip this year. If it's your own house, your own budget, let's just go on a trip every year. Pretty soon, you need a new furnace at home, or you need to take care of a new roof or other things that come up. And sometimes you have to pass on that vacation and take care of the maintenance of what you have. And I really think that we have to take care of some of those basic services that our residents are really hoping we take care of, and pass on spending a whole bunch of money this year to have a little bit better of a pot of money next year. We got to get the things like 96th Avenue done. We've got to get 120th done. These are the things that are in the works. I'd like to see more effort getting the things that are in the works done instead of stacking new things on top of it. And so this year, I don't have any special requests other than I'm concerned about the budget, the decrease in services for the road maintenance and the flat work and things of that nature. I know that we've had a lot of cleanup projects. I know that the Jersey barriers, some of those things that are having to happen. I like to focus on the basics and get back to where the residents are seeing improvements, not in one major thing, but all over the city in those things that matter on a daily basis. That's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Teeter. No, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I wanted to let anyone know here, and also who may be watching, that there is a SIP spreadsheet on the August 5th meeting. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and you can see what has been discussed previously and the status of those items. It's August 5th.
Councilmember Teeter.
Back to building the big city building. I'd like to back up on that, and that's something we should, when we do it, we need to plan big, I guess was my statement earlier. But what Councilmember Dukes and Ford just mentioned is we need to, right now, we need to focus on the basics. And we need to, we need to have a safe city for our residents, and we also got to look at the fact that hard times are coming, in my opinion, and we need to be prepared for them. And we just witnessed 4 years of the wide open border, and we see a little bit of the stuff happening now in Aurora with gangs taking over the city and stuff. And believe me, it's not just a problem there; it's going to be here. And so that's what we need to be planning on. A lot of people don't think it's going to happen. It's here. And so the basics, I'm all for the basics, number one. And when we've got any money left over, well, then we go from there. But it's all about taking care of our community first. That's all I have.
Any other council members for a second round? Councilmember Chacon?
Just reminding other council members, we need to be cautious about that type of racist rhetoric sometimes. I know that it's already been in the news about Venezuelan gangs and things like that, but it has actually been disproven. There's lawsuits about those families right now because it's actually a development issue. And it also vilifies an entire nation, Venezuelan and gangs and things like that, especially with the 70% Latino population. Be really cautious about how we project certain bias or projections, especially misinformation. So I just want to reiterate that.
Thank you. Thank you for his presentation on the budget. And I want to say that over the years, this has been a 5 or 6 hour meeting, which it should be. We shouldn't just be 2 hours. We should be going over all the line items within that spreadsheet. That's why we have these preliminary meetings, And starting in late June, going to July and August, and we get to this point, it should be a 6-hour meeting. We should start like about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and go over this. Because, yes, we do need to get back to basics. I've always talked about that in the last budget we had. Instead of leapfrogging, we need to make sure we take care of the things that people see, I think, on a daily basis. And that is, we are the first line of where their taxes are spent, is here in the city. And this is the first time we haven't had that much rain this year, but I see more green in the road than I have in my 20 years of living here in this city, going on 21. It's a shame. And, when I see the budget, and I see that, we have these top 10 or so, we have 100 and something, because it's always been that way. That hasn't changed. We had a retreat back in February. We're supposed to go over how the year is going to go, and if any council members wanted to add things in and how that would fit into the budget. And then it came out, we had a maintenance program with flat work and all that, crack seal and everything. And I did put forward some things that need to be taken care of. And those things still haven't been taken care of. And I have complaints with citizens on a daily basis saying, hey, I even put this in 2 years ago on a crack in the road. And I just, I had a picture here. And that's what we need to do. We have to make sure we are taking care of what our intent is, and that is our services. That's what we do. That's what the city's supposed to do, take care of services. And so I would say under pavement and management, 3.5 million, maybe that should be 4 million next year. We were, talking about the Buffalo Run Golf Course being $16 million or so. Where's that in this budget? Could someone tell me where that item is? Is it part of the $52 million, part of reserve or so, or?
It's already appropriate. So the 13.5 is what's been appropriated. It's already been secured in the CIPP fund for that project.
Okay.
The additional gap that we've been talking about for the more recent past with council is what's been at discussion.
Right. Okay.
So we haven't appropriated those funds because there's been no direction to go appropriate those funds from the unassigned general fund.
No, I
balance.
appreciate that. And instead, we have $17 million set aside for the police department. Is that correct, for the substation?
We have 17.
17. So if we take that $13 million, then we're $8 million off for the police substation. Correct?
In its current iteration that we've seen and that we continue to look at, yes.
Okay.
When we come to you all, and I can't remember which council member said it at this meeting, I think it may have been the actual mayor pro tem, talking about, do you further refine that building to where do you truly need a 38,000 square foot building? Do you have a smaller building at that location off 104th and Potomac, and then continue to think about another one further east, close to the E470. Those are the discussions that will help us, because we're at that stage before we've gotten too far down that path to say, oh no, now we've designed ourselves to 38 million and we don't have it. And that's what's kind of happened with the golf course, is that we designed ourselves through conversations to that point, and now we're trying to figure out how to be able to fund it. We're at that stage where we can easily continue to make changes before we actually go out to the community.
Right, and I agree with that. I think we should look at the dollars we have now and what that would how we would benefit from that. And then as we do grow and these neighborhoods are formed, we should have like sub gyms. So you have a instead of a traditional park, you would have a smaller gymnasium and maybe an outdoor pool or so, but it's underneath the city as far as building. And I had a question about the 2K bond. How much is left over to pay off that bond?
The original 2K bond?
Yes, because I know it's allocated for 156 million. I know we didn't use all the 156.
So we actually did a Cinderella bond based off of what was the remaining cap of the 2K, in which we have projects that are, one being the Second Creek Farms neighborhood park, one being the Monaco Park expansion. It was also 56th Avenue, 96th Avenue, and Chambers Road. Obviously, we had 13 million originally appropriated for Chambers, in which then the Reunion Metro District was going to put 18. The council elected not to enter into that IGA. So given that we did not have the necessary 31 million for the widening of Chambers from 106th to 117th, we took 10 million of that 13 and shifted it to the 96th Avenue widening project because we were 10 million short there, which got us to being able to kickstart that project. So we have a remaining balance of that, and plus an additional 4 million that can help us to start to look at design work as well as right-of-way acquisition.
So how much 2K dollars is left to pay back currently?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So all of the 2K bonds that have been issued have been spoken for in
Right.
terms of projects.
Right.
The 1% sales tax is what pays the debt service payment on every one of those 2K tranches.
Correct. So how much have we paid towards those projects so far?
We could get back to you with that information. Off the top of my head, I don't have the answer to that. Of
Okay.
the most recent issuance, is that what you're referring to?
Well, over,
Or
I
in
mean,
totality?
In totality, because those are started 5-year project that ended in 2019, and then so that's been 5 years.
Yep. We can certainly provide that breakdown to you. What I can tell you is of the original issuance, the projects that, we talked about the 5 and 5, all of those projects have been finished. If there were funds remaining at the end of those projects, then those dollars were moved to the 2K program contingency line item to be redeployed at another time. But we can absolutely provide a breakdown of the projects and the budget versus actual expenditures. We can bring that back to City Council.
Okay, thank you. Where I was going with that is, based on paying that back and how our city's growth is in the future, that's where, how in line of building backwards. So basically, population comes in, sales and use tax gets paid back, that we actually go to the voters and ask if we could use those two, go out and get a 2K balance. It's not increasing what we asked them, just using the 1% sales tax. We pay back those bonds to actually add on to this center here. That might be 15, 20 years from now. But at least we have the capability of, because that doesn't sunset, of using those dollars for that purpose, but going out and asking our citizens, because when we went out for that bond to ask, it was for pretty much earmarked for roads, new roads, parks, recs, and operation. It didn't have anything to do with add on to this building, because it's not going to be a rec center.
Right. Operations can be covered for 2K approved projects.
Right.
All authorization has been issued. So in the event we were going to issue any additional 2K bonds, that would require another vote because there is no authorization remaining.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is we would ask, once those bonds are paid off, we would ask the citizens, because that 1% doesn't sunset. It's just the language on the ballot, it's different. So that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
And when it comes to operations, and as far as, I know underneath the city managers, but when we're talking about budget, it would be nice to see how that employment yields services. So basically, if, roads, we need this amount of employees for the roads, and it yields this amount of expenditure. What is going to be a take to as part of our budget. Same thing with, as our city grows and we're getting new neighborhoods, we're going to have inspectors, whatever it is to take to make sure permits are permitted and what that yield is. So basically what departments and how, because as we grow, some of those departments will switch. They will actually decrease because we're not as growing as much as we were. So some of those services will be looked at different. It's a shift in services. That was just a comment. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Councilmember Dukes?
Just want to make sure City Manager Rogers got everything you need. I know one of the discussion items was to look at this budget and making sure as a council, as a body, we're okay with the additions. And is that what you need direction for as well?
Yes, sir. Coming out of here, we need to know if these are the numbers. So walking through very quickly, we have the Safe Streets Initiative that was, and I will call attention back to the appropriate slide.
Use slide 13.
That was slide 13, which we have included at 381,000. We have included the three items on slide 14 under core city programs at 191,000. And then we have included the difference between the 2024 budget and the proposed 2025 for pavement management, concrete flat work, as well as crack repair from slide 15 under concrete flat work additions to the tune of 1.08 million.
And then what I'm hearing just from the conversation from the body, getting back to the basics, this accomplishes that. Is that correct? I guess I put out there to the mayor and the bodies. So I want to make sure you get what you need. So what I'm hearing is basically getting back to the basics. Those additions help. Is that correct?
So I had asked about pavement management. Is it possible, could that be $4 million added to pavement management?
I would say that's a decision by you all as the body.
What slide was that? Is that?
Slide 15.
Slide 15.
And as far as capacity goes, we can make that work.
Okay. And then as far as concrete flat work, 600,000, being that we have tree roots up north and we had sidewalk connectivity down in the southern part of the city, the core part. Now, what about the tree lawn? Maybe that should be one of these flat work categories, tree lawn.
I just want to make, sorry, go ahead.
So I think that's a much bigger question for discussion for you all as a body, because policy-wise, you have a law on the books that requires the adjacent property owner to take care of that. If you want to give direction on establishing a program to provide aid to those who cannot, that is something that we can investigate and provide what that would cost.
Okay. Well, I'm proposing that we add a $500,000 to that program, and just to see where that would go each year, because we created this problem by laying out how those neighborhoods up north should look, having those smaller tree lawn areas. So is that possible?
So I think you first have to create a program, and we're doing so with the Build C3. Now that's in our core city, that's not across our city.
Yeah.
Because in our core city, what's not shown here, and Mr. Tolbert can correct me if I'm wrong, we are looking at coupling the Build C3 ARPA dollars, a good portion of that, plus our Section 108 funds under CDBG to the tune of $2 million. So truly we have 2.28 million to go towards concrete flat work. 2 million of that primarily south of 96th Avenue. Okay. Now, if you want to further that into the northern range, then the establishment of that program would have to be broadened, or we would have to create a separate program, because once again, the conditions of that are very different in the Northern Range versus the core city.
Well, since we're at a budget meeting right now, I would ask that we set the dollars aside, and then we can come back and establish a program.
We can do that. Perfect. What the Assistant City Manager Carsons was sharing is that obviously we can also do an appropriation once we have the program that can also set those dollars aside as well, where we have more due diligence and specificity around the numbers of what would truly be needed.
Okay. And then in the core city, it stood out, there was 4,500 or so violations. And some of those violations were people parking on surfaces that were not met. In today's world is a violation, but when they were created, when it came to permitting and what the scope of work was going to be done to complete a house and driveway, it wasn't recommended that it had to be concrete. So just driving through the neighborhood over the weekend and today, there's a lot of homes have dirt driveways, and people are getting violations for that, and I don't think that's appropriate to do that. And so here we're at a budget meeting, and they're talking about the C3, but there should be also a program, if not to put in a solid surface, but some sort of surface where people can actually park in a driveway. The city needs to help out with that, because again, we created this problem. Just as we did in the north with the tree lawns, we created this problem years ago before any of us was here, that people are still parking on something they parked 50 years ago.
Yeah, I hear you, Mayor. I don't know about the appropriateness of the budget and trying to make policy decisions without having all of the facts, because obviously the conversations as it pertains to what you're raising is being corrected through a little bit more due diligent operations and quite frankly, investigation on behalf of our staff as they work through the process. So I can't say a program and putting dollars aside based off of a case-by-case basis and knowing where that is going to afford what I think you're trying to deliver. I think if there's a desire to want to understand the construction practices that were enabled under previous municipal codes as well as land development codes, and what is truly the impact and how to address that, that is the prudent first step, is to go and do that work and to bring that back to you all, and then to see how to address that, to see whether or not we're dealing with outliers or we're dealing with something that is broad reaching.
Okay. Also want to include on, which has come up a lot too, of the flat work category, is speed bumps. That is a big one for safety, and I know we have to have a speed study done through a neighborhood, but I drove down Olive Street from 60th on down to 56. Well, hold on. And there was 2 speed bumps on Olive Street, but as you get closer to the elementary school, there were no speed bumps. And then you go over to Niagara, or Niagara, can't even talk here. There's missing speed bumps as well, and they all lead towards the school. Oneida Street, Niagara, those don't have speed bumps, but the end, as you go south, is the elementary school. So, same thing. That's another flat work. Well, not flat work, but I guess it is flat work because it's pavement management. Part pavement management.
Yeah. So I would say yes and no. There's still a step that we take as opposed to jumping from the issue to what we think is the perceived outcome. We still have to go out and conduct our technical review to ensure that the placement of said speed hump, or if the provision of a speed hump is warranted. And if it's not warranted, just through good governance, I'm not going to direct the team to go do such because there's other things that are at risk for those who have technical licenses. So I would say as well, and I know this is an item that you've raised with me, and we are more than willing to put it on a future agenda for council to weigh in, is for staff to go evaluate those corridors to identify the appropriate locations. And the reason why I say that is that when we were asked to look at speed hump or speed table additions to our various schools, both in the Northern Range and the core city, we still had to conduct an analysis on where best to place those and what type of speed tables or speed humps would be located. So we still had to go do that work before going and just putting them in, and we would have to do that here in this situation as well.
No, I get that. My thing right now is I'm asking for dollars to be set aside because we're at a budget meeting here. So I'm asking for those dollars to be set aside, and we can have the conversation later. But right now, it's a budget discussion. Do we have the money in the budget to allow for that type of work to be done?
Yeah, part of that is built into this budget that's in front of you now. Right. And with your expansion that you all seem to be in favor of tonight, obviously that's better for us. So that is a portion of these programs.
Okay.
So if you call us and you say, hey, look at speed tables on this corridor and we find they're warranted, we have some of that set aside in here for that purpose.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. I just want to make sure everybody knows that this is the night you ask for certain things within the budget, whether it goes forward or not, because when we open it up for the public, it's going to be really hard for each department to add these items on. So. Anybody else?
So if we can go back to that spreadsheet, it is my understanding that you all would like to add an additional 500,000 to pavement management, which would bring it to 4 million.
Yes.
I'm getting a general shake of the heads. Yes.
500,000 to make it 4 million.
Where do speed studies go?
Question from Mayor Pro Tem, where do speed tables or speed bumps?
Speed studies.
Speed studies go.
Speed studies would, I'm trying to remember what project line item that we have, but more than likely would go towards our pavement management because typically those are constructed out of asphalt.
Okay. But as far as the programming of our police department to do that work, that's a cost as well, right?
So yes, that will, so anything after this, like I said, will be a separate appropriation. Once we have additional direction and or we've come to some conclusions on where we want that to be. Currently, where it stands, you've already taken action for 17.1.2 million in that line item. The question will be whether or not that stays at 17.2. If there's any additional general fund balance transfers that would, or unassigned general fund balance transfers that come online, or whether or not we want to utilize COPs to bring that, to bridge that gap for that facility in the Northern Range. Like I said, that's all of a conversation that we plan to have with you all here in the near future. Once we've actually gotten the materials from our architect to review and to make sure that they're in a good position. You know, over the last couple of years, how we've been able to get to that 17. Add to that additional budget, to that budget, we would have to continue doing what we have is when we've done our sales tax audit. This year we had a sales tax audit of 6 million. You put that 6 million towards the future police substation. So right, there are annual opportunities and we've seen strong numbers from those who we've been able to recover that have helped to bridge that. But once again, it's also looking at a combination of how to get there as well, because a design process is going to take 6 to 8 months regardless.
Mayor Pro Tem Noble?
Yeah. Thank you very much. One thing I have noticed, we don't have a city attorney budget, the city attorney's office budget, for not just staff, but consultants, and also lawsuit things and that matter. Does that kind of thing come before us as well?
I'm looking at Cheryl. I think the city attorney's office budget is in the base budget. We do not have a settlement fund, which I'm glad you brought up. That is on my to-do list to talk with my deputy city attorney about, hopefully within the next 6 weeks to bring to you all. That's something that I've been in conversations with the director of HR and the city manager as well. Just, it's not ripe for a conversation with council yet.
Okay, but there isn't a budget for the city attorney's office that the city council sees. It's part of the city manager's operations budget?
It's in a separate legal department budget, but it's included in the general fund budget that's presented.
It's wrapped up in administration. So when you see administration, that consists of the city manager, the legislative budget, as well as the legal budget.
Okay. Same with the court? Is that all legal also?
Court is a separate division under city manager's office.
Okay. So I think the mayor had talked earlier about seeing something that's more detailed. I think that would be helpful in the future. We're not going to get it this year, I don't think, but next year it would be really helpful to have a more detailed budget to actually look at.
And just wanted to also ask, I know it says here removal of inoperable car vehicles under the Build C3 program. How much money is set aside for inoperable vehicles under the C3?
We have allocated $200,000 for all code over the next 2 years to help with all code violations that citizens might have.
All right. Yeah, we were in Sacramento for National League of Cities, and they got a lot of cars removed off the street because they gave people $500 to remove cars out of their driveways, that were inoperable, and it was almost like where you trade guns in or whatever. A lot of people opt in for that because they just didn't know how to remove the vehicles out of the driveways or out of the backyards. So I think if we can look how those funds are laid out, maybe even allocating $10,000 or something like that, just to see what impact that would be, and see how that would be for next year, if we could do like a pilot program or so.
We have 2 years of the ARPA money remaining left, 25 and 26. And again, one of the programs was to assist with code compliance for people that are low income, disabled, not able to do it themselves. And again, any code violation, which those would be, we would be able to assist when it helps us achieve what we want to achieve.
All right, and the last thing is down here, people also are getting a violation for trash cans on the side of their house, even though they removed them from the street. Does the ARPA, does the C3, with the violations, does that have any program built in so people can actually add wing fences to the side of their homes to have a privacy screening of their trash cans?
We don't specifically have anything for that, but if they're doing a rehab of their house, which is part of the program, then we could include something of that nature.
Okay.
Possibly, yes.
All right. I'd just like to see that within our budget, because it's under operations, if we could work with people, if their trash cans are off the street inside the house, I don't know what that goes underneath as far as codes or so. Or like I said, budget-wise, maybe also budgeting to make sure that people who go out in the street actually go through a program So when they're talking to people, they actually can really connect with them to see what their needs are instead of coming in and just giving a violation. So just for training.
We're, based on the conversations that we had with y'all a few weeks ago, we are having conversation with code enforcement about retraining and actually being a kinder, gentler enforcement group, having conversations everywhere we can, identifying who needs assistance.
Okay.
And when we give citations, we've got an application form that we'll be using that, all right, if you've got this citation and you need help dealing with it, fill this out. We'll evaluate it. If they qualify, then we'll be able to help them. And again, it's pretty basic, but it's, it's putting the onus on them to ask us for the help, but we got to tell them it's available. And we'll be doing that when we issue the citations.
Okay, I appreciate that. It's in the budget. Yes.
I just want to make sure that everyone's clear on this. So there's a really important distinction here between code enforcement, right, and who has the discretion and the charter authority to determine whether or not a code provision will be enforced, and that is squarely within the city manager's purview. If we're talking about a program that would potentially assist individuals and that needs money, then we're talking about budget. But we're graying the area a little bit here on.
Well, I did mention several times operations.
I understand.
And I just want to make sure that in our budget, if we have the money in there for training, because as a council member, a lot of my emails and calls are from violations.
I understand, but budgeting funds for training for individuals to determine whether or not to enforce is squarely within enforcement discretion. If we're talking about a program where we're helping residents, that is different, and that is certainly well within the confines of this conversation and budgeting.
And that's why I keep saying operations, that it's not under us.
Just making sure we're clear.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Noble.
Thornton has a program that residents can apply to get help on code enforcement violations. And Thornton will help them repair whatever needs to be repaired or solve the problem, as the case might be. So I think that is something that you're suggesting, Mayor. I think the same, very similar, that would be very worthwhile doing in Commerce City, because we have residents who are economically burdened and aren't able to make these repairs. They might even have made the repairs themselves before they got the violation, but simply can't afford to do it, and they need help to accomplish it. I think Councilmember Ford was talking about somebody who had a couch, but they just couldn't move it. So things like that would be really important. I think that would be a worthwhile expenditure in terms of getting back to basics as a basic program. So I'm fully in support of that, Mayor.
I will say we have looked into that program. It is under their CDBG block grant. It's called Code Cap program, Code Cap program. And it is the removal of hazardous waste, trash and debris removal, including furniture, appliances, and vehicles, fence repair or replacement, and minor restorative front yard, water-wise landscaping. Finer point to Jim's conversation around Bill C3. That is very much a mirror of what we will be doing through the Build C3 program in the core city, is that program with that type of money. So we are already going to be doing something very similar to that with that program.
Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you very much for your time and effort, all the staff members for being here tonight and answering those questions and listening. Appreciate it. Left to the staff. All right. On to report, City Manager Rogers, you have a report to make?
Yes, Mayor, thank you so very much. Out of Economic Development, staff is starting to work on an RFP for a consultant to develop a telecommunications infrastructure strategic plan that includes fiber, cellular, and satellite communication strategies. There was a brief discussion in the past about what we are trying to do as a city to help broaden those access to those technological opportunities for our community, and this is a step in trying to ascertain how we could do so. Second, we're having our second public open house for the Transportation and Safety Master Plan effort at the Bell Creek Community Center. I believe that is tomorrow from 4:30 to 6:30. And obviously, we've started to do the East 62nd Avenue and Holly intersection construction project that started last week with the expectation that that will be done by mid-November. We have the Monaco Park grand reopening tomorrow at 4 o'clock to celebrate park renovations in the new fitness area. If you haven't seen along the Second Creek open space, we have new shade structures up, and we've provided for new playground equipment at Stampede Park. The chief will be kicking off the first Citizens Police Academy in its many years this Wednesday at 6 p.m. We will have just over 20 attendees that will spend 9 weeks with CCPD. As well, our crime prevention unit is officially up and running. They're working primarily out of the Small Business Resource Center. That space has been updated to reflect CCPD's presence, as well as they made contact and continue to engage with the various businesses within Derby. You all have your first talk around town this Thursday from 4:30 to 6:30 at Morisco's Sinaloa. Opportunity for you to chat with City Council about questions and ideas and topics on residents' minds. A little bit of note about myself and the chief. The chief and I are going to be holding 2 small community town halls to talk about operational efforts to address crime and public safety from both of our respective roles. One would be held in Adams City, and we're looking at trying to hold that at the Fire Association building off of 69th Avenue, and the other one will be up at Bell Creek Community Center. We're still working on details, but we expect to do that in October. And then just as for your awareness, September, obviously we have 5 Mondays, and on the 30th and October 1st, we would typically meet with Adams 14 and 27J. The mayor has reached out asking if we would be able to postpone that meeting with both school districts until after the election. I shared I'd raise it with you all here tonight to get a consensus on whether you would like to keep those meetings or have us reschedule. These are our typical 5th Monday meetings with Adams 14 and 27J. The mayor thought to reach out and say, given that we've got an upcoming election, it's best to postpone after that. Mayor, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But since I need direction from the body, I thought I'd raise it here to see what your consensus is in postponing these meetings. September 30th. And it appears that 27J has elected not to meet with us on October 1st.
It's not a 5th Tuesday.
Oh, it's not a 5th Tuesday. Sorry, my apologies. So it's only a 5th Monday, so it'd only be Adams 14 on September 30th. Please take 27J out of the equation.
Councilmember Douglas.
I also thought after our last meeting with, joint meeting with 27J, that they no longer wanted to do those meetings. There was, that was made clear by Mr. Green, who sits on the school board. And that's what I thought, was that they didn't want to have those meetings anymore. But maybe I got the wrong message.
I wasn't there at that meeting. Do you recall, City Manager Rogers?
I think it may be a mixture of 2 different items, Mayor. I think they were fine with doing the 5th Tuesdays. I think it was this discussion around trying to bring back the Education Commission and whether or not there was any need, feasibility, any desire to do that. Since that meeting, we've not brought that back before them for any continued discussion.
I'll just concurring. My understanding is that they still would like to meet on the 5th Monday, but they weren't clear on the Education Commission.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem, did you have?
I just wondered what the reasoning was for not doing it.
Oh, I was asking about setting it up, and I talked to AMS 14 about it, and they had expressed they would like to wait until after the election. So I thought that would be.
That would be in, there is no 5th Monday until March.
Well, there is, but we don't have one in December. So.
What are you looking at?
September 30th.
Oh, do it on,
That's our regularly scheduled meeting. to hold
right,
it
but
out
if
for-
we skip it,
Correct.
it's not until March.
Yes, ma'am. You're
That's what
accurate.
I'm trying to say.
But we don't have to wait until a 5th Monday. We can start having these meetings at other times if it works out.
So I'm sorry, December 30th is also a 5th Monday.
Right.
We have the 2nd, the 9th, the 16th, the 23rd, and the 30th of December.
Correct, but I was figuring New Year's Eve probably isn't when we want to be having a meeting with Adams 14. Just me. I don't know. I don't know about the rest of you, but
Not arguing with you on that one.
you can come in if you want.
Yeah,
Councilmember Dukes.
I would be okay. I would be okay meeting with them on September 30th. With the elections not till November, I think I would be okay having a September 30th meeting.
Okay. Councilmember Ford? All right. Councilmember Teeter? No, I'm asking, would you like to have the meeting on the 30th of this month? Yes or no?
I'm okay not having it. I know Councilmember Kim had some concerns about CSOs being in the schools. I'm sure we'd want to have a conversation, but I don't necessarily have a need to be on the 30th.
Okay. Councilmember Chacon? Okay. And Mayor Pro Tem? Do you want to meet on? Do you want to skip it or do you want to have it?
What's the vote so far?
So far. Councilmember Douglas, where are you at?
I would go with the preference of whatever the district wants.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I mean,
If they want to wait, that's fine with
yeah,
me.
it does. I mean,
All right.
I'm not going to force them into a meeting that they're
that's
looking
fine.
to.
Well, we'll reach out. City Manager Rogers, could you reach out to AMS 14 and clarify if they still want to have the meeting right now? The consensus is if they don't want it, if they do not want to meet, we're fine. But if they do, we should schedule.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Are you all good?
Were you done, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. City Attorney Zarzaki.
I just have two items. As you all know, we have Bob Widener coming to a study session on October 28th to provide training for Bob's rules. Some council members have reached out asking questions about Bob's rules, and that's fantastic. And I hope that you all take advantage of that and certainly reach out to me between now and then. The most important thing for me is to make sure that your questions are all getting answered. So with that, the question that I have for this body is, does the council desire to invite all of the other boards and commissions, or even the chairs of the boards and commissions, so that they're also hearing this training? I spoke with the clerk about this morning. There's a couple of options here. One would be, first of all, this meeting would be recorded, so we could separately send out the link to the study session where the boards and commission members can see that you're asking whatever questions you have are getting answered. We could also send an email prior to the meeting for anyone that might be interested or have questions on procedural rules to make sure that they're also getting answered. If there's a desire by the council to invite others, the reason why this really matters now is we would want to have that meeting in here to make sure that there's enough space for folks if there is going to be a large attendance, as opposed to the smaller room. I do not have strong opinions either way. Myself and the deputy city attorney are already identifying a way to have separate procedural trainings for the chairs of the respective boards and commissions. So this might just be duplicative in nature, but wanted to at least extend that opportunity if that's something that this council wants to offer to boards and commissions.
Again, that's on October 28th, right?
Correct. Yes.
That meeting, I'll be on Zoom. So I will be attending, but I'll be on Zoom.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So I think that'd be great to have boards and commissions here, roundtable discussion, just so that they can feel free to ask those questions because it's weighing heavily on their minds, and just to clarify how they should proceed in their meeting. So I'm agreeable about that. Councilmember Dukes?
I agree as well. I think having them here, having some common language, and it'll be a good chance to see some of the chairs, since we haven't seen all of them in one spot in a while, so it'll be great.
Councilmember Douglas?
I think that including them would be beneficial for both the council and the commission. So just a chance to interact and get to know each other as well.
Okay. Councilmember Ford?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, me too.
Councilmember Teeter?
Yes, it's good that we all be on the same page.
Okay. Councilmember Chacon?
I'd like to meet them and duplicate it so that everybody knows those rules real well.
Great. Perfect. Thank you all. The other update for you, as you know, we had gone out for a land use attorney. We have not had a candidate yet that we have hired. That posting is currently closed, so we've pivoted a bit and wanted to give the council an update. We are likely to have outside counsel under contract through the remainder of the year. Jerry Dahl, who I know you all many of you have worked with previously, he and his firm had assisted the city with the sign code. We are negotiating a contract right now. I think that's relevant for this council for a couple of reasons. One, we will have a land use attorney helping my staff and myself personally look at the LDC rewrite. But more importantly for this body, I know when I had started this position, there was an interest in getting land use training. And I want to make sure that we're getting that to you. And that is something that we would do as soon as we get under contract with Jerry. I think the biggest question that I have for each of you, and I'll reach out to you separately, is what are those questions? I mean, saying land use training is a pretty vague term. Understanding, zoning matters versus annexation process, et cetera. We can really get in the weeds, and I hope that we will do that in the next 2 months to make sure that you're all getting the questions that you have answered. So that's just a quick update. Like I said, I'll be reaching out to each of you separately to get a sense of what questions and concerns you may have, and we'll go from there. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Any council members have?
Question.
Oh, yes. Question over here from Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I think that this is also another case where it'd be useful having the Planning Commission do the same training with the City Council, speaking of being on the same page.
Yes, good point. I was absolutely envisioning doing the same thing.
Yeah.
With Planning
And the
Commission.
other question I had was confidential legal status reports from you on open cases and resolutions and that kind of thing, so we can keep track of what's happening
Yes, so
on the city level?
Yeah, so I send out a quarterly litigation report, which you have received so I had not started for first quarter. I had sent out the second quarter, and we'll send out at the end of the third quarter a litigation report. If there's anything else that the body might want, I'm happy to provide it.
Okay, and we can expect that when then?
So at the end of the third quarter, which is coming up, we'll be providing it. I can tell you there's not a substantive update, which is a good thing, from the second quarter update, but nevertheless, you will get that.
Okay, and what are you calling those? What's in the
It's
second?
called, I think the title is Quarterly Litigation Update.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Any council members have a report to make? Councilmember Ford?
I just want to remind everybody that Saturday is the fireman's spaghetti dinner from 2 to 6, I believe, at stations 1 and
3.
And Station 3, and what's the one up north?
8.
8. Station 3 and Station 8. It's a pick up and to go, but it supports our firemen. So, and it's a decent meal for Saturday night.
Thank you. Anybody else have a report to make? Councilmember Chacon?
There we go. Yeah, my hands are sweaty. This Friday and Saturday, I believe it's with Groundworks Denver, there's going to be tree planting with youth in Commerce City. It's going to be at Fairfax Park, and I believe it starts from noon or 1 to 5. So it's from Fairfax Park. You can sign up still if you want to get a tree. They deal with all irrigation. They get it all ready, and they'll be with youth as well for Groundworks Denver. We're also going to start a program for an org, for 3 different orgs, but with Adams County Health, and we're giving out water filters. So it's a year's worth of water filters in Commerce City, and that'll be one event, and we'll be doing 2 more in Commerce City and 2 more in Thornton and North Glen. But the first one is this Friday and this Saturday. So trees and water.
And where's it at, Friday and Saturday?
Fairfax Park.
Okay.
And I'll forward you guys the flyer too. Sorry, I'm looking for it right now.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you very much. I attended the new Active Adult Center grand opening at Bison Ridge. There was really a wonderful turnout. The entire ballroom was used for breakfast bingo, so that was pretty exciting. And then a lot of people came through the facility itself. The staff did a really wonderful job, and I think everyone's going to enjoy using the space, having a space to themselves that way, or sort of to themselves. I also attended the Employee Appreciation Barbecue, which, talk about a turnout. There was a real sense of staff growth because of the number of people who had to find other places to sit. Not only were there the normal places that they had sat over the last couple or 3 years, but they extended beyond and over into Paradise Park area. So it was really a huge turnout, and it was a really lovely event. As I think I noted to everyone that I was having a meeting with David Foster, who is an attorney for developers and so forth. It was a good meeting. It turns out not only is he the attorney for Republic Services, which I knew, but he's also the attorney for Daniel Frank, among other developers here in Commerce City. We talked about a vast range of topics. It was really a very interesting session, so I appreciated the time. I also attended the DuPont Magellan meeting that Cultivando and Adams 14 had at Adams City High School on Saturday. It was so well done, a really great turnout. Everyone is, there's an awareness that's been raised of what's happening near these homes and near this school, and they are really trying to do all they can to prevent the other 5 tanks to go in that area. The fact that homes were allowed to be built that close to the facility way back when, and a school as well, is probably the biggest mistake that I have ever seen made. So that was really unfortunate. I would also like to know what we need to do about the EPAC letter, Mr. Rogers. You mentioned in your email that staff could assist with it, since we have already taken a position in the City Council voted to oppose DuPont Magellan expansion. You asked if staff, how we felt about staff helping with the letter. So how do you want that
Yeah,
to be determined?
Yeah, I appreciate that, ma'am. I just want to make sure that I'm clear. Given that it is your board and commission and that staff has no participatory role, the letter should be coming, and I guess this is I think a more policy-based question, because when you look at the resolutions of the charter, now this is my policy review of it from my side of the arm. This is not representing any review that may have been conducted by Lee or his shop, but when you look at the resolutions, it is an advisory committee to the council. They can take a position, and that position would then be a recommendation to the council, not as an independent body taking action of sending a letter. If you want to give them that provision, then obviously I would say that the resolution would change. So if you're wanting to aid them in any aspect, it's how to be able to ensure that they're complying through the functions and the duties that have been laid out within the resolution that established them, or then reestablished them from the original time frame that was set in 2021. So I would say, and once again, like I said, since this is your board and commission, staff doesn't have any functionary role in drafting a letter and providing support in that manner. And it wouldn't be appropriate for us to do so, given that you all, the board and commission reports to you all and staff reports to me. So I think that's something that would have to be discussed at a much larger picture. But once again, I'm speaking from my perspective. The city attorney may have one of his own as well, but.
So first of all, I think facts matter a lot here, and I think Mayor Pro Tem, you said the letter, but I'm not aware of the letter and how or whether it was crafted. I think that matters a lot in this context, right? So you have the original resolution as well as an amending resolution that creates the EPAC. I would agree that the whereas provisions lay out the intent of the EPAC, which is to provide in an advisory way recommendations to this body. Now, if council were to advise or make a formal decision that EPAC should also write a formal letter, I think that is within the council's purview. I don't think that EPAC or any other board or commission that is advisory to this body should be sending something out with council's authority prior, right? I think that's step one. That is very distinguishable from a member of the community who also happens to be a member of a board or commission. And if he or she chooses to write a letter in their individual capacity, there's nothing precluding them from doing so. That's why, again, I say facts really matter here. So if there were an EPAC letter, and that was a letter that this council directed them or supported them to do, that would be step one. But then step two is factually what does that letter look like? Who's crafting that letter? Is it on city letterhead? Is it on EPAC's letterhead? I don't know if they even have a letterhead. I think all of those things really matter.
Okay, then I think we have a couple or three things to do. One of them is that the deadline is too tight. It's coming up anyway in order to get it to CDPHE, so we can just put that aside as to whether to have that discussion. On the other hand, they can, as a group, but as individuals, send their letter in to CDPHE and say that they are individually members of the Environmental Advisory Committee.
Yeah, so, and not to go down a tangent, but this is a perfect example of another thing that I've identified, which is to make sure that my office has a staff attorney assigned to every board and commission so that they can ask these types of questions on the fly and they can get legal advice, and that's something that we are working on.
Yep.
Yes, but to that note, I think it does matter significantly if those individuals are sending something in writing and it's suggestive that they are representing the city, right? That's where it becomes problematic because they're making recommendations in an advisory capacity to the entire body of council. I wouldn't want them to do that without council opining on
I
that
wouldn't
first.
want them to do that either, and they're, according to the resolution, not to vary the direction, which they are not. We already voted on this, so there is not a variation of our direction.
That's correct. That's in the authority provision of the resolution, but you have to look at the function section, which lays out all of their functions, and those are recommendations and advisory. So my read would be that they're making any formal position that they're taking under the authority provision of the resolution is for them to take a formal position that would go to this body.
Right, but they're not taking a formal position as a body, they're doing it as individuals. So that would be okay, just as if I testified at a hearing at the state capitol and the city council had not selected me to do so, I would say that, because they would identify me as a city council member, I'd say yes, but I am testifying as an individual. I am not
Correct.
testifying.
Yeah,
on behalf of
my
the
legal recommendation certainly would be, as long as they're clarifying that they're submitting a letter testifying in their individual capacity.
Right,
That is
that's all the point I
correct.
wanted to make. And then my third point is that since I made this resolution initially to create EPAC, that we can also modify as we see fit going forward if there is a majority vote to do so.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Oh, wait, one more thing. This came from a resident. This is strictly operational, so I keep that in mind. I understand that. But apparently tomorrow night's transportation planning session is the same time as the Adams 14 board meeting, school board meeting. And so the resident was hoping, well, let me take it a step further, is that maybe we can make sure when there are things happening in Commerce City that we check we know calendars of other agencies so that we don't overlap with them.
I think that's a fair request of the resident. We'll look at that as we go forward with future community engagement events. We'll make sure that that's happening more consistently. So,
All righty, thank you very much.
my pleasure.
Anybody else? Councilmember Douglas?
This button was hard to find. I just wanted to say that I also attended the presentation that was put on by Cultivando at Adams City High School for protesting the permit that has been actually already pretty much issued as a minor modification to add the 5 tanks as an expansion, which although it's in the county, it impacts our people, and that is our role, to serve and protect. And so, yes, it was a very well put together event, and I just can't believe how Cultivando has grown over the years and how they are doing very impactful, meaningful things within the community, and bringing up leaders that never thought they could be leaders. And so we have to give them credit for that. So that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Chacon?
Sorry, quick update. The tree planting was from 10 to 2.
10 to 2. Okay, thank you. All right. Let's see, I attended a Tuesday 120th Avenue corridor study, Adams County. They had 3 options that were laid out. I say it was well attended by the community. And their concern was the bus lanes and the pedestrians. And one of them, the third one, I think, had it where it had a bump out to protect the biker against the bus. Because the other one, it had it where there were just painted lines in the road. And you know how big, a big vehicle is, and a bike, the bus is always going to win. So attended also Saturday, Magellan Pipeline with Cultivando, and I will say the community came out and told a story of how this would impact their health, and they had a 2-hour window, and they met that 2-hour window. They stayed in the course, and but they actually let people be able to weigh in and have a dialogue, because this is very, very important. It's unfortunate this is working behind, because it should have been out to the community first. As we all know, when we talking with our community, we want to reach them first, not after. So, and then tomorrow I'm going to have a breakfast with Joe Donahue. He's the new executive director for E470. And that's it. I hope everybody had a good time for Labor Day, got well rested before we continue to have our rest of our meetings this year. So, but I do appreciate everybody who comes here and participates, because every meeting is important, and the staff is here for us and here for the city. So, thank you. With that, the time is 9:40 p.m. Seeing no further business, meeting's adjourned. Yeah. Like in here? I can't hear you. Yeah, it'd be nice if we had study sessions.